And welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the Hagmann Hagmann Report on this Tuesday, September 9th, 2014. This is a live broadcast. I'm your host, Joe Hagmann, with my co-host and father, Doug Hagmann, who is not here right now, but will be joining us sometime, hopefully, right after the second hour. We have a great show tonight for you. We have a guest and author, Mr. Bill Bassar. His website is letssavebourconstitution.com, and he has written a few books that we are going to be talking about tonight. One in particular, 95 Theses Project, Let's Save Our Constitution. And this is a great book. It gets into the history of the Constitution and lots of quotes and comments from the people who signed the Declaration of Independence. And it gives you an interesting look and in detail about not only what the Constitution says, but what were the ideas behind what is in the Constitution and why the laws were framed the way they were. And with that, I'm going to bring on Mr. Bassar. Again, his website is letssavebourconstitution.com, and I'll post that in our interactive chat room. His books are 95 Theses, Let's Save Our Constitution, and the novel that goes along with this, if I'm saying that correctly, is 2020 Torn Asunder. And with that, Mr. Bassar, it's great to have you on the show.
Well, it's great to be here. Thanks, Joe, for having me.
Absolutely. And, we're having you on now at a time where things in our country are so twisted. I'm going to let you open up with your view on where our country is now and where we came from.
Okay, well, what it is I'm just like most normal Americans out there going about my business, working and raising family. And yes, I was raised by a father who was concerned about our country, but I just kind of let it go in one ear and out the other. And one day I got more involved, and all of a sudden I had this gut-wrenching feeling that, gosh, Bill, things are bad. I had to do something. And so I wrote the novel 2020, which is 2020, which is the year 2020, Torn Asunder. And it's just like the typical normal Americans in how we are just going about our daily life, unconcerned about what's happening in the political realm of our country. And I became a delegate to the state convention here in Washington, and I walked out of there really mad, and I realized why we were in the trouble we were in. And so I came up with the 95 Theses based after Martin Luther, of course, and his 95 Theses, and it was basically propositions to discuss what is in the Constitution, what mine is, what the Constitution stands for. And, of course, the Catholic Church they would not debate Martin Luther because that's what the idea was, and so the Reformation started. And so hopefully we can debate it and change what we're doing in our country. But let me start off first here tonight. I would like to let you know that after going through all of this, I want everybody to know that our Constitution has really been declared null and void by Congress and agreed to by the President. We the people are the subject to be ordered to accept these consequences because the Constitution is really null and void as it stands today. Because Congress says that we have serious problems in our country, and the President says we have serious problems in our country, and they can only be solved if we all get along. We must not cause religious dissension. We must not be negative. We must accept the coming economic downturn because Congress is doing everything to straighten out the mess. And we must accept all the new regulations. Congress and the President are here to help us. This is declaring that the Constitution is null and void when they're doing all of these things. We must slow down the debt, they say. Christians must not say too much to cause trouble. We must listen to the major news programs. The President is in control. Don't worry about it. Our new friends from other countries, we must accept them and allow them to mix in. And, of course, all guns must be registered. There are no illegals in this country at all. And the President is in control. He'll make his decisions when he makes his decisions. And Congress can make any laws that it wants to. Henceforth, folks, again, the Constitution is declared null and void as of this evening. And it's what the null and void means, it's The Constitution has no legal force. It's not binding. It's invalid. It's irrelevant. It's of no value. So, folks, this is the reality that we're facing. This is the truth. And why is it so? How did this happen? Well, it's because we the people do not know what the Constitution says. And I don't know if Joe wants to interact here, but I basically am telling everybody is that as of this moment, in reality, the Constitution is null and void.
Yeah, it is, and we see this political theater game that continues. But to validate what you just said about the Constitution being null and void, I mean, just look at everything that we see going on. We see the president saying, Congress isn't acting fast enough, so he's going to rule by executive order. We have the Department of Justice, along with the White House administration, breaking the law on many issues, and immigration being first and foremost in today in the headlines. We see even another issue, and this is on the back of your book. You quoted Thomas Jefferson talking about the judiciary of the U.S. is a subtle core of sappers and miners constantly working underground to undermine the foundations of our confederated fabric. And we see, as one example, gay marriage, and I think it started with Proposition 8 in California, where they put gay marriage up to a vote for the population in many states, and most of the states voted to ban it, or they said no, and we had the Supreme Court come in and overturn the citizens' decisions, calling them unconstitutional votes. And I mean, we can sit here and give many examples of how our Constitution is not being followed.
Yeah. So the main thing that these people in Congress would tell you, or even the main politicians, the head of the political parties, be it the Republican, be it the Democrat parties, is that they say, well, it's an antiquated Constitution. It isn't for today. It's a living, breathing, document. And I always tell people when they say that, I realize that most people have not been taught the Constitution in school in reality. And if they have, they don't remember anything about it. And we must remember that before the Constitution was adopted, there was no such thing in the world. All we had were dictators. We had pharaohs. We had kings. We had ruthless rulers, the tribal chiefs. That's all there was in the world until 1787, when the Constitution was adopted. Because never before was there any freedom to worship. There never was no free. People were afraid that the government would come and take their land. Their businesses were not free. They were not free to speak. There never was a limited government. They never had been blessed with domestic tranquility. There was never a fair justice system, and on it goes. Never the freely to assemble. They never had the right to bear arms. The government had all the arms. So, how did we secure our liberty? Well, first, the Declaration of Independence, they promoted it, and they pursued it, and they went after it. The Constitution provided our liberties. But where are we today? Our Constitution, what's the insurance against tyrants? What's the insurance against the vain and aspiring men? And it's there's no insurance other than us, the people. And so it's up to us, the people.
And when you have the masses, or us, the people, and we were talking about this right before the show, being, indifferent to the Constitution, and actually, some people don't even agree with the Republican form or the Republic form of government anymore. You have the rise of communism through socialism in our country. You have these varying viewpoints against capitalism and the free market, and they are attacking these different foundations of the Constitution, free market form of government that we have. And from the guns, you can see where there are these points of freedom: the freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom against illegal search and seizure, freedom of self-preservation. All these main pillars of our freedoms are being attacked today like never before in the history of our government.
Yeah, you're exactly right. But a lot of times the people think that everything that's happening is proper and in its right place. The judges say so, blah blah blah, and the politics of the country goes on. And I would ask the people, there's several questions you could ask. And I don't know, maybe your people out there really know this stuff, but I know there's always people out there that do they really know what the Constitution says? Does Congress have the power to regulate guns? And where is it mentioned that the state has the power to regulate guns? These are questions they need to ask. Where does it list all the executive powers? And what is the supreme law of the land? Some people don't even know that the supreme law of the land, the U.S. Constitution, that is to what? Regulate the federal government and the state governments. It's not against us, the people. It's to restrain our government, and so I'd like people to list the article or the section where Congress has the power to provide economic relief. Where does the president have the power to say, well, hey, I'm going to make a decision on the immigration problems that we're having in the country? Where does he get that power? Show me in the Constitution.
Point.
People don't know where that is. But
and that's a great point. Bill, sorry, folks. Doug Hagmann here. Bill, can you hear me?
Doug.
Yeah. Hey, I'm tardy to the party. My apologies. I had a meeting that ran late, and I didn't get to catch the beginning of the program, the first 10 minutes of the program, but I'm here now. I just want to say that folks are listening to Bill Bassar, and of course I'm sure Joe introduced you, the author of 95 Theses. If you go to HagmannHagmann.com on our website on the left-hand side, is a direct link to Bill Bassar, his website, and of course his book, 95 Theses. Fantastic book. I spent the weekend going through it, and just a tremendous book in terms of the data. And Bill, did you go over how, in the manner that this was written, in other words, the style in which you wrote it, what prompted you to write it in the style that you did? Did you go through that yet?
Well, not in detail, no. Okay, let's backtrack. Yes, that's a good idea. Well, I did say that I had just about completed the 2020 Torn Asunder novel about a typical, normal, naive American, blah, 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 and how by the year 2020, that's the situation our country will be in, and it could be worse than what I even wrote. I wanted to make it realistic. So I was a delegate to the Washington State Convention, the Republicans, and I came out of there madder than a wet hen. I was on the Rules Committee. I had a struggle and a fight on the Rules Committee because no one wants to debate. They don't want debate. They want everything to be quiet and nice and this degree and all get along and blah, 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 and away they go and have their party at their national convention. And I came out of the mat. There was a lot of people. There was a lot of us that were really angry. So since I'd been writing, I was sitting there, and so I'm stewing. What am I going to do? What am I going to do? I got to do something. And so I'm out walking around like I do a couple times a week out into the trees and the woods out here, and all of a sudden one day, well, I'm praying to God and says, God, what can I do? And he says, well, Martin Luther's 95 Theses. And I says, oh, wow. What a neat idea. I think it's a good idea. I'm going to look this all up and read it all again. And I did. And then it led to, well, I got to back up each thesis with a quote or quotes. I had a lot more quotes even on my website than are in the book. And the book could get too big. So anyway, that's how it came about. I was following the leading of what I felt I needed to say. And I'd created a video. God created our founding fathers and a few other things, and that all got into the book. So anyway, that's how it all came about because I was very perturbed.
Well, and I think that, you know what, folks, I think that's an important part of the story. I didn't mean to come in here like a bull in a china shop takeover and say, well, but I thought that was a good, a pretty interesting part of your story, the fact that you realized you saw the system from the inside out, at least to the extent that, as a delegate, and realized that nothing mattered. It was a dog and pony show, smoke and mirrors, whatever you want to call it.
It is a dog and pony. And I don't know if anyone's ever been to it. I was a little upset at the county convention. Well, this is just our county convention, And so then I got to the state convention, and I'm sitting here, and the people are being told how to vote. They're standing up, no, yes, no one. They're all a bunch of sheep.
Who's telling them how to vote?
The people from the heads of their delegations of their counties.
Okay, now
not my county, but it was major big counties that had the most of the voters there. They were all standing up. No, whatever the rules were being voted in or against. No, yes, no. People weren't thinking for themselves. They were being told how to vote, and they did. And I wanted to be a delegate to the national convention. Well, guess what? That was all figured out ahead of time. Didn't matter who wanted to be, because I was told by the people, "Wow, we really liked what you said." But no, they still voted for whom they were told to vote.
But wait a second. Isn't that based on? You'll have to give me like a civics lesson here. Okay, so when you're a delegate, you vote for a certain party or a certain person, right? Is that
correct? For the national thing, yes.
Okay, all right. So
that's not what I'm referring to so much there, but yet they were still lock and step in behind who they wanted to go to the national convention. They didn't care.
Okay, but I guess my question is the process. You've got a bunch of people in your district, right? And the bunch of people in your district, if they vote, we want Jim Smith as president. So you get 95% of the people who vote for Jim Smith, but you don't want Jim Smith for president. You want Ron Brown for president. Mm-hmm. And you say, well, my vote's for Ron Brown. Is that what you're referring to, or is this something totally different?
Well, that's what I was referring to, because let's just say you were all for the same person at the national convention. They still, at the party level, the local levels of your district, they were in control, and their people were being told who to vote for to go to the national convention. Seriously.
All right. I get that.
But,
okay.
Yeah, and that is, but that was also on the convention floor when it came to other things to vote on, which weren't very many other than rules. They were all being told how to vote. If they wanted to close debate, they closed debate. They didn't want debate, so they quickly closed debate on everything. So, anyway,
what a party smasher that is.
Oh yeah. They didn't want you to debate. They shut it down before you could even stand up and say anything. And then you're only allowed 1 minute, and you only can, if you were the first one to speak, you were allowed to speak 1 more minute. You're only allowed 2 minutes. And I thought, how in the Sam Hill can anything get discussed if you're shut down by the minutes? I thought of our founding fathers who debated the Constitution for 4 months. I mean, literally, James Wilson, I think, spoke 168 times at the convention. So nothing would ever get done nowadays, I can tell you that right now.
So
anyway, that's what made me write the book.
Wow. Well, important background, folks. And again, our guest tonight is Bill Bassar. His website, Let's Save Our Constitution. Is that right? Let's Save Our. I'm reading up here from.
Yep.
All right, and it's available right from our website, HagmannHagmann.com. Folks, please change your bookmarks to HagmannHagmann.com. We'll be updating that website on a consistent basis. One of the situations today is collecting some information for a very topical report coming out. Hope to have that out here as quickly as possible. But Joe, I'm going to turn it back over to you. I just came in, interrupted you, and rudely stuck my nose in this. I was out here in.
It's nice to hear from you, Doug. No problem.
All right.
So I guess let's go back to we have the Constitution, the Declaration of Independence written, and the Constitution, and we have our Revolutionary War. We have our freedom after the winning of this war, and our government system is set up and declared across the nation. And where do we see? I mean, we know that the freedoms did last a while. We did have a civil war after that, the War of 1812, before the Civil War. And where was the turning point where most politicians started to go away from the Constitution, started to make their own laws? What laid the groundwork for what we see today with the lawlessness?
Yeah, your voice is kind of getting real staticky in there, so hopefully I heard everything. From the very beginning, you see through the James Madison and then Thomas Jefferson quotes, and then also there was William Rawle, who was a very well-known lawyer of that day, and then there was St. George Tucker, who was a very well-renowned lawyer of that day. You saw immediately in the early 1800s they were complaining about what Congress was trying to do and what the judges were trying to do. So it was a battle then already. But I think the biggest problem was the Civil War caused the main loss of states' rights, where the states were scared to speak up. But I think the big thing started like around the time of Teddy Roosevelt, and then through the World War II. And then it just escalated after that. And because Teddy Roosevelt, who everybody thinks so highly of, he started the FBI, and there was a real uproar in this country. He executive order created the FBI. He made the executive order. There's no such thing in the Constitution for a president to make an executive order. It had already been ruled unconstitutional back at the time of Andrew Jackson.
Andrew Jackson.
And so it was a constant battle all the way back then. But anyway, that's when it really started, I think, is at the beginning of Teddy Roosevelt, and then through Woodrow Wilson, and then into through the World War II. And then Johnson came in with his, Poor Act, help I forget the name of it right now, but it's escalated to the point now.
What you just described basically was a change in the banking powers, a change in the war powers, and a change in the political powers through these different leaders.
Yeah, and then what you really saw is the education of the children. And I can tell you, to be real honest with you, I can go back and probably, if I wanted to be really, there's a lot of things we can talk about here tonight, and part of it is Bible and God and all of this, what is very much responsible for this. But in 1958, the Supreme Court declared that they were the supreme power. What they said was the law. They declared that. And then what did they declare? God out of schools. No prayer in schools. And that was the big beginning.
Man.
That was that's where it all escalated, when they started taking God out of everything.
Yeah, I agree. And our government was created with three powers, the executive, legislative, and judicial, all equally having, or supposedly equally having, equal powers. And yet, as you said, it was in 1958 that the Supreme Court declared its own supremacy over the other two branches?
Yes. And that's my number 9 thesis in the book, is Supreme Court is not the law of the land as they ruled in the case Cooper versus Aaron in 1958. And then, of course, I've got 3 or 4 quotes there, and I can go to the book and for instance, so yeah, that's, to me, you asked the question, when did it all start? Well, it was from the beginning. They had to fight it, but it really escalated at the beginning of, the Federal Reserve was brought in and all of that, and then it really took off right after World War II. Social Security, I think, was started during World War II, and then everything took off. So all the social programs and all the economic programs all took off in the 60s.
Interesting. Okay, and I want to say this, folks, about this book, 95 Thesis Project, Let's Save Our Constitution. There are 95 points that the author brings out. And what I like about this, too, and you've got to really, to me, this is a reference manual for the Constitution and for where the Constitution has been violated, how it's been violated, really who violated it or what entity violated it. And it takes a look at the Constitution and how it was written, the vocabulary, what words mean at the time that they were used, which,
right.
One of the most common things, okay, for example, the word militia. What do they mean by militia? I mean, of course, the author goes through that, or guest old Tsar. So the bottom line here, this book is a fabulous. I found myself when I was doing something earlier today using your book as a point of reference. In fact, it had something to do with Obamacare, and you've got Obamacare mentioned in here, where in fact point number 49.
Well, also number 4.
For my purposes, 49, the Supreme Court ruled that amended insurance and the Obamacare legislation was a tax, even though it wasn't a tax. And that, of course, is taxation without representation. And it goes on and on. But, with that, a fantastic reference guide. I've got to give you a lot of credit for what you've done.
Well, the intent is to be a reference guide. Intent is, okay, let's just right now go to something I was going to bring up later if I can find it here, but it's, for instance, let's go to biblical sources here. It says in Hosea 4:6, people are destroyed for lack of knowledge. Yes, this is referring to the biblical things, but also it refers to our Constitution. If we don't have the knowledge of the Constitution, we're going to get destroyed. And we are being destroyed. And it says also that wise men, they store up knowledge. It says in Proverbs. And then it also says in Proverbs, prudent men act out of knowledge. You can't act and not have knowledge. You got to have the knowledge. And this is what I wanted this book to be. Some knowledge in your hand. You can have it as a reference. And then you can act out of it. And then you can talk to people wisely and with good information. And don't worry, I've practiced this. I work around people who are dyed-in-the-wool Democrats and socialists and you name it. And to be real honest with you, they're coming around my way of thinking. Because I don't argue Democrat, don't argue this or that. I argue the points. This is the facts. This is our problem. Why do we have this problem? Let's see. What does the Constitution say? And then you go from there. And it also says in Proverbs 19:2, it's not good to have zeal without knowledge. So
that always got Joe in trouble when he was younger, and me too. Well, digs after his old man. Let me get right down to something here, if I can digress a little bit. And folks, this was not scripted. We don't have talking points. We're going to be kind of using a shotgun approach all over the map here. And, of course, it's folding in your questions as well. But, Bill, let me ask you a question. This is something that I will I've been an investigator 28 years now in the public sector. And I got to tell you this. You cannot convince me that, first of all, I don't even know the true legal name of the entity residing in the White House, who we refer to as Barack Hussein Obama. Mm-hmm. Having said that, obviously I don't know if his legal name is Obama or Barry Soetoro. Therefore, we don't know if he's eligible to be president under the Constitution. What do you say about that?
Correct. Well, I don't have the facts. I can tell you that, but the Constitution says you have to be born in America, born in the United States, and if you're not, you can't be president. That's the Constitution. So, I think we have problems, and that's one of the problems. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, let me just say, you've got to be a natural-born citizen. Okay, now natural-born citizen is the subject of much debate. Some say, you've got to be born on American soil. Well, McCain wasn't. Well, McCain was. I guess it was on.
if you're on a military base somewhere, I guess they consider that natural born citizen. Yeah.
Right. But you go back to the idea, okay, well, what is a natural born citizen? Then you've got the various Supreme Court arguments. You've got you've got so many layers to this argument, but the bottom line is the fact that we don't know, honestly, if this guy is qualified under the Constitution to be the leader. And what really just throws me is how the entire legislative branch can essentially cede power to this guy, as they have done since he's been in office. Cede power in different methods. But any thoughts on that? You know, how they had that special whatever they call that super committee or whatever, the creation of that super committee.
Well,
what the heck?
Okay. Well, you just brought up an interesting subject, because I think where I'm going to head with this is that, for instance, the Constitution gives the president, if we go to the article and the section, and it says here's where the powers of the president are, and basically all he has is a veto power. He's the commander of chief of the armies and navy and whatever, and he can appoint judges that have to be approved. He can make treaties but have to be approved by the Senate, and it's, along the lines of that. And so he has those powers, which are very limited. Okay, so when you're talking about executive orders, that's not in there. There's no executive order for the president. If he wants to tell his cabinet member what to do, he can, but that's it, So, for instance, I just recently went through the cabinet members of the president. And for your information, we just had a pretty bad disaster out here where I live. It was the Oso mudslide. So in comes FEMA, and well, that really got people upset, because this was a small area of loggers and builders, and basically, you know what they told FEMA? Get out of here.
Sure.
And FEMA backed off. FEMA was trying to order people around, and they said, no way, you don't know what in the Sam Hill you're doing. Get out of our way. Anyway, so I looked it all up, and so mainly the big culprits are, the Attorney General is a cabinet member. The president picked him. The president is in charge of him. But what does the Attorney General have? Hey, he's in charge of the Justice Department. Well, who's under that? ATF. He's in charge of the FBI. He's in charge of the NSA. He's in charge of the FEMA. He's in charge of the Drug Enforcement Administration, the Environmental and Natural Resources Division. He's in charge of the policing services for the communities, or whatever it all is. The president is over all of that power. How in the Sam Hill did that happen? That's not in the Constitution. And then we have the Department of Interior. You have the Bureau of Land Management. You have the Fish and Wildlife, national parks. They manage a fifth of all the land in the country, et cetera, et cetera. And the president is in charge of all of that. Where did he get that power? It's not in the Constitution. It's not even the Congress's power. Congress only has 18 powers. And so what I said at the beginning when you were there is I basically said Congress and the president have declared the Constitution null and void. And they really have.
Yeah.
And we're allowed them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One thing that bothers me is, I try to keep up with the executive orders that I see put out, and I always see a what would you call it? A disclaimer almost at the bottom. It says this order is not intended to, nor does create any right or benefit, substantive or procedural, enforceable at law or in equity by any part against the United States, department, entities, agencies, officials, employed agents, or any other person. Basically saying nothing in my executive order is meaning to go against the laws already created. Yet we see the complete opposite with that. Many of the executive orders are enforced and do go against our constitutional law.
Oh, and
how do we rectify this? Aside from, people have to be informed, but once they're informed, what are our means to combat this?
Well, I have a whole litany of things that we can do. Number one, we have to become informed. We have to realize that everything that, in my opinion, almost everything that Congress does is not following the Constitution. The president is not following the Constitution. And that my book, what I did in the book is I broke them down. I probably could have had another 95. So in the book, I broke them down piece by piece, so you could see this little item right here, so you don't see the big picture and get it muddled. So you can break it down. And then I may have presented it from a little different angle once in a while, because I saw Martin Luther did the same thing, and his 95 Theses with the church. So how do we rectify it? I've thought about it, and I've thought about it, and I thought about it. And number one is we have to understand the Constitution. That's number one. We have to teach it. That's also part of it. And then there's a lot of other issues, but I think the best way we're ever going to overcome this is through the local people at the local level. Once they learn all of this, they start electing their statesmen and stateswomen to their local legislatures, which is in their states. Because I think the only way we're going to overcome all of this is through our local states. That's our best chance. You're not going to make it at the federal level.
So, and I don't mean to be abrupt. Okay.
And can we? Yeah, you're right. I don't know.
But yeah, okay. And
because I think it's like the 2020 Torn Asunder book. I don't think it's going to happen until it gets that bad, and then I have no idea what's going to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And Bill, you and I didn't talk before, but the way I look at it is this. One of the quotes I recall, I think from one of our founding fathers said basically that this government, our representative republic, was not set up for an immoral people. Okay, and we've lost our morality, we've lost our spirituality, we've lost our way, we've kicked God out of schools, we've done everything against God. We're under a judgment phase right now, and unless we do a 180 and a real quick, I'm not sure that would even help. And
you're on a good subject there, because in reality, you're right, and I have that in the book quite a few places where I honestly say I believe it was almost every one of our founding father quotes that I have listed in here. They will tell you they said that same thing. Hang on here, John. I think you're referring to John Adams there. He says our Constitution was made only for a moral and religious people. It is wholly inadequate to the government of any other. Without morals, a republic cannot subsist any length of time. That was Charles Carroll. And on and on. I got a lot of them, and they're all saying that. So our problem is, okay, let me backtrack. You're right. I believe that the people is at fault. We are the people who are the watchdogs over the government. We are the police of the government. We are the judges of the government. We are the ones that have to make the rulings over the government. But here's our problem. Our souls, our passions have been contaminated by self-pleasures. We're going to games. We're having parties. We're going to big football games. We're getting all wrapped up into all of this stuff. Our spirits are poisoned by the media, the harangue of all the guns and the deaths and the shootings, and so we're getting all messed up, and then our minds are polluted. And we've turned away from God. There's no morals. There's no virtuous people anymore. And without that, so I believe it'll take a miracle act of God to come in and change people's minds, souls, and spirits. Then I believe it'll have to work from the local level through the state legislatures. I'm going to tie that all in. Yes, it has to be that way.
Well, it comes back to all politics is local, really. I mean,
yes.
When it comes right down to it, all politics is local, and it stems from there. However, we have a government that is tyrannical at this point, has turned tyrannical, and now is saying it's all federal, and everyone else is subservient to the federal authorities, and we've got a very educated audience. Bill, I got to tell you, and I know you've been on a number of talk shows, and you've had a lot of experience talking to groups of people, but we've got a very educated audience about the Constitution and about God and what have you. So, a lot of people, and folks, I do recommend Bill's book, 95 Theses. It's Let's Save Our Constitution. Whether or not you can or not, it's a great encyclopedic book for for you and I to argue our points with these psychotic socialist, Democrat, communist
or
bastards
just plain
that want to
local
bring down
people
the
at work
country
that don't know. That's
right.
why I think it's good for. So
that's right. Joe, let me toss it back to you since I've been monopolizing here.
No problem.
No, I want to, in Part 52, or number 52, only blind justice is constitutional, not social justice. You have a quote here. It says, the worst tyranny is that of misapplied laws. And is that where we are today? You talked about the local governments having the ability in the states, the local governments being the solution. The states were given the power, but though the states did not assert their power, it was then taken by the federal government. And we know that this is contrary to what it states in the Constitution. It says, and I have to find it, but that no power or any powers that are not declared by the Constitution are left to the states. Is there a unified effort to keep the states at bay? We hear about these succession movements and independence. Texas wants to break off from the Union, and would this ever be a possibility where states could secede from the Union? Do you think the federal government would ever let that happen?
The way it's going, no. But here's the thing, getting back to the states, is there are, that's why I'm saying the states is where it's going to have to happen from, and I don't know if there'll be a seceding, but there are a lot of quotes from the Founding Fathers in regards to this, and what I found interesting is that, but the problem is, yes, there's the federal government has a monopoly over everything because everything that they do has money attached to it. So the local states have money coming in from the federal government, or the schools have money coming from the federal government. And we have all of this attached with monies, and then they have the rules and regulations that you have to follow. So what the state would have to do is say, no more funding and no more laws. Because our Founding Fathers said it's a nullification. The several states, being sovereign and independent, have the right to judge of the infraction of the rules and regulations and laws, and that a nullification by these sovereignties of all unauthorized acts done under the color of that instrument is the rightful remedy. In other words, declare it null and void. But, see, our government is declaring everything null and void because they're not following the Constitution. It's up to the people to say it's null and void. And I think the perfect example of where the states went wrong recently was, remember what they decided? Well, we got to do everything through the courts. So they went with the Obamacare, the 21 states or whatever it was, 26 states, they took it to the Supreme Court. Well, all they have to say is, this is nullified. It's not a law, and we're not obeying it. It's not a law. It's unconstitutional. That is the rightful act. The judges are corrupt. They're all in the system. And because it's obvious that even the Founding Fathers, I have quotes of them talking about that, even back in the early 1800s. But their acts shall become nullities is what they're saying. Jefferson and I think Madison said it. And then, anyway, but I don't know if the states will do that because it's up to the local people to elect the local people into the state governments to make it happen. And that's about, to me, and of course, until people get their act together and come back to God and the Bible. And see, we're not living on principles. So we don't care if our government doesn't live on principles. And I remember there's a quote here that I had is that the tendency of all human governments, this is Thomas Jefferson, is a departure from principle becomes a precedent for a second departure. In other words, that second for a third departure, and so on until the bulk of society is reduced to mere automations of misery, to have no sensibilities left but for sinning and suffering. And the four-horse, guess of this, the four-horse of this frightful team is public debt. Taxation follows that, and in this train, wretchedness and oppression. So
We
people
got them
don't
all.
have principles. Pardon?
And we have them all essentially. I mean, we're under we have an intelligence insider that often says that the United States is a captured operation, that we've been captured from within. And I think, looking at your book, reading your book, and seeing the Constitution, the meaning of the various aspects of the Constitution, how it's been violated, I believe it. I mean, this is incredible. This is a huge, by the way, folks, this is a huge topic to really grab into, to sink your teeth into, because the one thing that struck me, Bill, is the research you must have done. I got to ask you, how long did it take you to write this book?
A lot faster than to write the novel. The novel took me 7 years.
Yeah, the novels are difficult.
Yeah, and this in here, I would say it took me a year to write it in my spare time, and then I had to. The big thing was to put it in the format that I wanted it to be in a small booklet, and so that actually took about 3-4 months to do that with the publisher and stuff. But I would say the actual and I keep changing. I kept coming up with new quotes of founding fathers. I found founding fathers or names of people that I didn't even know existed. I'd never heard of them in my life because, I was a history major. You think they taught me anything about these things? Heck no. Whoever heard of Tench Cox? Whoever heard of St. George Tucker? William Rawle, a well-known man in those days, but we never heard of him. And so I kept, and these people, they wrote commentaries, constitutional commentaries. William Rawle has it. St. George Tucker wrote in the Blackstone commentaries. And,
yep.
And on it goes. There's several others. And you go in there, and yes, it's legalese, but you'll find a little nugget right here, You'll find the nuggets.
Very interesting. Okay. Wow, there are so many different directions we can go right now. I'm curious. Before we get off into other areas, I'm really curious. When you saw, maybe because you mentioned, we were talking about Obamacare earlier. When you, in fact, point number 4 and 49, when you saw Chief Justice Roberts come out and be the deciding vote that Obamacare, the National or Affordable Health Care Act, is actually a tax, were you on board clapping and saying, he's a brilliant man, like Rush? I think Rush Limbaugh said this, I wasn't sure, but I know others did, saying, wow, the brilliance of this man to label it as a tax.
No.
Okay.
What I saw is this, and I think I have it. I don't even know exactly which one it is right now in front of me here, but what I saw is, do you remember that the president went and talked to him? They had a conversation. They have a discussion. What was that about? Has any president in the history of the country ever gone to a Supreme Court justice to talk to them about a bill or about a rule that they're considering? I don't believe so.
Interesting.
And I thought, no. And then so I see my founding father quotes, which says, when there's a concerted effort between two branches, the judges and a branch of government, you are in big, big trouble. And I saw that. And I says, that's it. We're in trouble. We're in trouble now. And sure enough, we were. I was appalled. I was sick.
Okay.
Because I saw.
You observed that, and you knew something. That there was some collusion somewhere, and I think a lot of people feel that way as well. You mentioned taxation. You mentioned our debt. I think by virtue or by reference, we're $17 trillion in the hole. $17 trillion.
And you want to know why?
We're never going to get out of it. So yeah, I do.
You want to know why we're in the hole? We haven't even talked about that. I don't know if I mentioned it in the book this way, but why we're in the hole is because we're not following the Constitution. If Congress would have followed the Constitution, they have 18 powers, right? The 18 powers has nowhere in there where they have the power to give money to people. There's nowhere in there they have power to give them unemployment. They have nowhere a power to give food stamps. There's nowhere in there they have power to give housing to people. There's no power in there that they can give Medicare to people. They don't have that power, but they give that power to they take the power, and then they spend the money, and they give the people the money, and that makes the big debt. It's all a purpose. They want a big debt. They want us to go in the hole. They want a bad economy eventually, so we're all mediocre. And we wouldn't have the $17 trillion in debt if they had followed the Constitution. The other thing is they have no power to have all these federal lands. That's not the Constitution. They're managing it.
Biodiversity Project, yep. Through Agenda 21, the Biodiversity Project, the United Nations really.
And to take it a step further, the ownership, the foreign ownership of U.S. lands that we have today. We see, China buying up. What do they own? Like 60% of New York City, it's stated, and they're buying some of these, national parks.
Real estate.
Yeah.
Right.
How far does this go?
Well, the main thing is that before this hour break is up, there's one other thing that I always have people around me, they hate big business. They hate it. And I says, well, you know something, guys? The reason you don't like big business is because the government caters to them, right? Well, yeah. And I says, well, if we had followed the Constitution, the federal government has no right to any economic help. They have no right to make laws that tell people how to make things and not make things and what to sell and what they can't sell. It's up to each state individually to handle the domestic affairs of their state. If we had domestic affairs in 50 different states, these big governments would have to go to 50 different states, not just to Washington, D.C. to get their stuff together. All they have to do now is go to Congress. And so that's another big problem we have. It's all the powers are right there in Washington, D.C., and it was not intended to be that way at all. And that's what's causing all this.
Right, and that's it. I mean, it's centralizing everything. And Bill and Joe, Joe and I were talking earlier today about how everything is becoming centralized. Back in 2013, you had the Federal Reserve Act passed, and you've got a centralization of the economy through that, and then of course the so-called. By the way, where in the Constitution is the income tax, not taxation, but income tax? Is that in the Constitution?
Not the original. They passed an amendment in 1913 saying that an income tax was proper. I mean, they eliminated some of the stuff that was in the Constitution. The original Constitution, there was no income tax allowed. But in 1913, when did the Federal Reserve start?
13. Yeah, 1913.
Same year. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Well, it began with the Aldrich, the Aldrich Amendment, and then it was reformulated, and okay. Man, this is incredible. We've got so many problems, constitutional problems, or problems with the Constitution, starting from the renegade in chief, and I call him renegade in chief. Bill, we've never talked about this, but his Secret Service code name is a renegade, and it's not so secret. But renegade means traitorous, seditious, and lawless. And
right.
Look it up in synonyms.
Well, in my novel, I don't know if you've gotten this far yet, but it's I've got a green army in the novel.
Okay.
I wonder who runs it. Maybe it's the renegade.
Yeah, perhaps. I got an email from Helen M. I want to just mention this will be before the top of the hour here. Helen M., thank you, Helen, for this. To address Mr. Bill Bissar's question, I think it was perhaps a rhetorical question, as to where Congressman Obama gets their powers. She writes that she found this list of executive orders in an article today that would certainly help make the Constitution, quotes, null and void. And she lists, she lists a page worth of executive orders from, looks like they're in numerical order, so, well, no, apparently not. From 10/990 through, through the 1950 Defense Production Act, the Act of August 29th, 1916, to the National Security Act of 47, on and on and on and on. So Executive Order 1098 allows the government to seize all means of transportation and so on.
Everything.
All of these, So
they mean farms, it's land, it's roads, it's towns. They can tell you when to move and where to go. Yeah.
So, but what you're saying,
I've gotten those lists of things. Yeah.
Okay, so but what you're saying is constitutionally, regardless whether it was in the original Constitution, Bill of Rights, or as we went through the years, none of these powers were obtained legally or constitutionally.
No. Tyrants take them. Make the power. No, it's not.
Gotcha.
That is the thing. See, it's not the rule of law. The government gives us all these rules and all these regulations, and they expect us to follow them, so they arrest us. But they're making all these rules and regulations, and they are not. They're illegal. They're not supposed to be making them. And they are the ones that need to be basically, quote, arrested and put out of office. Where did they get the power to tell us what to do and come and arrest us with guns? It's not in the Constitution. But they're doing it. And we allow them. So
unbelievable.
It just the more I dug into this, I was upset. I knew the Constitution, but not as well as I thought I did. I didn't know my government wasn't doing the bad things it was doing so bad that I finally one day I said, they're not following the Constitution, period. They do. Well, you can be president for 4 years. Well, when's that going to change? I mean, for two terms. Because in that National Security Act of I don't know when it first started. I thought it was 52, but there was that National Security Act is where they get away with all these executive orders. The Congress has given the president powers. They have given it to the president. They don't have that power to give the power, but they have, and it's blatantly unconstitutional. And so he thinks he can do anything he darn well wants now, because the Congress has given him certain powers, which is what whoever emailed you is to take over towns, to the roads. I had a great quote from. I thought we were at the top of the hour here, but I had a great quote here from James Madison, and basically it has to do with general welfare. And if general welfare, if Congress can employ money indefinitely to the general welfare and are the sole and supreme judges of general welfare, they may take care of religion into their own hands. They may appoint teachers to states and counties and parishes and pay them out of the public treasury. They may take the hands of your education of your children. They may assume the provision for the poor. They may undertake the regulation of all roads other than the post roads. In short, everything from the highest object of the state legislation down to the most minute object of the police would be thrown under the power of Congress. Were the power of Congress to be established in the latitude contended for, it would subvert the very foundations and transmute the very nature of the limited government established by the people of America. They were already doing it at the time of James Madison. But guess what? It's where we are today, totally.
Yeah, absolutely right, Mr. Bassar. We're at the top of the hour break. We're going to take that now. Folks, our guest tonight is Bill Bassar, Basaar. His website is let'saveourconstitution.com. His two books, 2020 Torn Asunder and 95 Theses, Project Let's Save Our Constitution. We will be right back after these short commercial breaks. You're listening to the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Tuesday, September 9th, 2014. Usually, ladies and gentlemen, hour number 2 of the Hagmann and Hagmann Report on this Tuesday, September 9th, 2014. 14. Our guest tonight, Mr. Bill Bassar. His website, let'saveourconstitution.com, and his books, one we're talking about now, 95 Theses, Let's Save Our Constitution, and a novel that he wrote before the 95 Theses is 2020, Torn Asunder. That is a, what would you call that, Mr. Bassar, a historical fiction?
I hope not. In a sense, it's a futuristic prediction of the United States based upon what I see happening in our country. And I tried to do it very realistically. I tried to take the main character, who was a climatologist young lady, and she was naive and didn't want to watch the news and could care less what's going on in her world other than she was in climate and she was doing studies and blah, blah, blah. And her dad was opposite. He was telling her she got to be in tune, and she wouldn't listen to guys like you, and he was trying to tell her to. And pretty soon things started happening, and she realized, well, maybe Dad was telling me some truths. And pretty soon it got worse and got worse, and her world around her started collapsing. She had no idea there was all these rules and regulations out there. And by the time you get to the end of the book, it gets pretty nasty in this country. And I could have made it worse, but I tried to make it very realistic into the world that we're in. But it's like the lobster in the pot of water that's warm, and then it gets warmer and warmer and hotter, and they don't even know what's happening until they're dead. And that's kind of where we are.
The frog in the water. And folks, we're going to be taking your calls at 661-244-9839 for our guest, 661-244-9839 for your guest, or for our guest, Bill Bassar, author of 95 Theses. Before we do, let's get into, we have a gentleman that is a frequent guest on our program, frequent commentator on our program. He's a member of the intelligence community, Bill, and a great guy. He goes by the initial W. He wants to weigh in on a couple of things with respect to the Constitution and get your take on a couple of things as well. W, are you there?
Hey, how are you doing? Hey, I appreciate the great work that you're doing there, and I just, one thing that hit me right off the bat with the way that the case is stated here, and it's semantics, but I think it is important. And I think of the biblical example where they were bringing the Ark of the Covenant back to Israel, and they were doing it incorrectly. It required the priests to carry it on poles, and the priests were the point of contact. And at a critical moment, they had it on an ox cart, and the ox cart started to tip over and was in danger of falling to the ground. And so a good man, a righteous man, a well-meaning man who was there reached his arm out to stop the altar, the Ark of the Covenant, from falling to the ground, to save it. And he was smote dead right there on the spot by the Holy Spirit. And so David and the others were just shocked by this. Here they thought they were doing the work of God, and they're trying to do everything right, and they hadn't followed the instructions properly. The instructions didn't say to move it the way they were doing it with an ox cart, and they were improper in the way in their function. And so this man died because they hadn't paid attention to God's instructions about how to proceed. And so, in the context of saying that, it's like saying we have to save the Bible. We don't have to save the Bible. The Bible doesn't need saving. We need to live according to the instructions of the Bible. We need to follow the Bible. We need to do those things which the Bible outlines as instructions for us to do and not to do. But we don't need to save the Bible. The Constitution is practically a holy document. To me, it doesn't need saving. We need to reprogram the people to understand that this is not about saving the Constitution. This is about living according to the precepts, the designs that were engineered so wisely, so thoughtfully into that document that prescribe the relationship between the governed and those who govern. We give the authority to the governors via the Constitution. It's a limiting document. There's no function of government that is allowed in there that is greater than is what the minimum is that's needed to accomplish its purposes. In other words, the Constitution is a decentralizing document. It reduces the powers of government and spreads them out as far and wide as possible for one purpose, and that is to stop any one man or group from being able to divert us, Al Capone style, into their little kingdom, their little rule, even if it be at the point of a gun. And the problem is that the way that governance is taking place in our country, we are being moved into the pens. We're being herded together. Agenda 21 or health care. Every angle, we're all being moved into these cattle pens, and pretty soon we'll be going down the chutes to slaughter. And that centralization is the core of the crisis, even to the taxation, because when we talk about the currency and the taxes, what is it that is giving the federal government the power that it is exerting, wielding over the states and the people by extension? It is the money. And if you cut off the flow of funds, you stop their ability to project power. So even with this collapse of the dollar that's coming very shortly, there is an angle of that where the federal government, this highly centralized, highly focused machine that's working against us, is about to have its collapse. And so all of that to say, I almost in big red X letters would cross out save and put in force.
Well, yeah, and I guess save is more of an emotional term.
I'm just talking an idea here. I'm just saying,
it's more of an emotional term, but you're right. You're right. And I'm saying it's up to us, we the people, who've got to enforce it, but before we enforce it, we got to know what it says, and a lot of it, most people do not know. So,
well, but
you're right. That was a good explanation.
This principle that we're trying to project, to convey to people, if we don't state it right, we don't quite make the case right. They don't still. We add to the confusion, and so we have to state it correctly. And then suddenly there's this synthesis, this wow, I get it, that hits people when we make our case correctly. And that's the whole point. What you're doing is critical work to help inform people, to wake their brains up. What's going on here? Shake them to alertness.
Yeah, if you read the theses in there, you'll see over and over, and even in the introduction, where I'm saying it has to be enforced. In other words, this is wrong. This, but you're right. Enforce. We the people who have got the power. We're the police. We're the judges, and we have to do this. So.
Well, and even there, see, that's part of the whole point. In an Al Capone type of world, if you own the judges, you own everything. When you look at where we've gone awry, it's when, for example, the Warren Court decided that they would create law, that they would become an activist court, as opposed to just interpreting the laws as written by Congress, in which the president has the authority to sign and bring into passing this agreement between the three branches. We've lost our separation in government. Even the IRS stuff, even the Federal Reserve stuff, the problem is they own the courts, so they got everything. They got it. When the mob, when you go to the Godfather movie, what was the court? They didn't just have the politicians, they had the courts. And with the courts, they had it all. And so that's our problem. We can't get a fair day in court. And suddenly, when you lose that justice, when you lose control of proper reading, interpretation of the laws, you lose your right to control the direction of your country or your own life at every level. And that's the crisis that we're faced with right now. If we're going to get it back on track, at the end of the day, how do you stop this centralization? Where's the monkey wrench? And I think you were close. And the only thing that I would add that I think is worth all of our consideration, at the end of the day, when this battle finally comes to a head, this states' rights versus federal rights, this decentralization versus highly centralized, it will be when one of the governors or a cluster of them decide that the federal government cannot do things in their state, and in order to, when the citizenry agrees that they disagree, it's going to be over taxes once again, and it's going to be a governor saying, I am directing my citizens in my state, my fellow citizens, that we as a state should not be sending any money to the federal government. And by the way, federal government, we don't need anything from you. We don't want anything from you.
And I believe that's where we need to go. So
that's where it's going to go.
Because that's what I don't know when you listened or not, but we've been talking about the local people have got to vote. Know what they're doing here. Read the Constitution, understand what it is, and get them into the state government. Get a legislature in the state government that starts doing what you just said. It's exactly the only way we can do it.
Here's my only thing that I'm just going to bow out now. But here's the only thing I'm going to say: the critical piece in all of that conversation, and this is what I heard, and this is why I thought I wanted to just elbow my way into the table here for a half second, and that is, it will still all just be words until you cut the flow of oxygen off to the beast.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Until you say we're not sending that taxes into the federal machine, we are not playing the game anymore because you have exceeded your authorities. You are not doing what the governed agreed to constitutionally, so that governed refuse to play the game. It's like nuclear war. The only way to win is not to play. And by the way, that's what the feds are threatening you with. A total destruction environment, because everything coming out of Washington at this point in time is designed, intended to destroy the rights of the citizens or individual states and bring all power to the federal government, which they are going to hand over to an international body and are handing over to international bodies, and that is at odds with the Constitution of not just the written Constitution, but of the internal guts Constitution of every American citizen. It disagrees with my internal Constitution to have my rights, God-given, handed over unlawfully to others outside of my country to then enslave me and enforce against me. And my federal government is doing that today. It's wrong. It has to be stopped, and it won't stop till we cut the oxygen off to them, which is our life energy represented by money.
Good point. States have got to cut the money off. Yep, that's a good point.
Hey, guys. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Toby.
That's a great conversation you guys are having. All right, good night. All right,
thanks, buddy. Yeah, Bill. I mean, it does come down to the
state's got to cut off the money. Yep.
Okay. Now, do you see that in under what circumstances, perhaps, do you see that taking place?
Oh yeah.
Well,
I hope it never happens, but I can tell you, I believe it will happen.
Where a group of governors could get together and say, perhaps,
I honestly hope that I can see it start happening, but are they going to take too long?
That's I mean, how long we have? Well, I think we're on borrowed time now.
Maybe till 2020.
Yeah. 2020 torn asunder.
Yes, you got it. Because it gets pretty bad then.
great novel. Yeah, indeed. All right. Okay, what haven't we covered here that we need to cover? There are so many directions we can go, but take us someplace where you're comfortable with in terms of saying, look, we need to pay attention to this or to that.
Well, let's see. Well, the main thing, I have what we need to do. We can go back into that now. He just suggested what the states need to do, but it's up still to the people to get involved in all of that. But I think maybe I ought to just, I don't know if what people need to hear. You guys are well educated and know everything, but do we need to go over any of the theses in the book, or just explain how it works?
Well, yeah. Well, feel free. Feel
the
free
one
to,
that I... Go ahead.
No, just Joe was going to say something, I think, but feel free to take us down through the theses or any particular ones you feel impassioned about. And
well, the one that I think most people get impassioned about, and I realize that when I'm listening and watching, and yeah, there's another area I can go here. The gun rights in our country. So, for instance, there's laws, federal laws, there's state laws, there's city laws, there's county laws, there's all kinds of gun laws, okay? And they're limiting what guns, some cities have no guns, and on it goes. Well, our right to bear arms in the Constitution is given to us in Amendment 2. It states it right there. And our right to bear arms gives we the people the right to carry arms freely from state to state, and is not limited to small firearms, but to any firearm that the government armed forces uses. It's not to be infringed upon. Then I have a bunch of quotes here, and I mean, there's some really powerful quotes here. And people say, well, that isn't... I said, no, these are the laws. You cannot infringe upon them. Every gun law in America, in my opinion, is an unconstitutional, illegal gun law. There's no such thing as having a gun law according to the Constitution. And the big one that I always thought was the one that nobody knows about, and that's Tench Cox, and you probably have read it. He was and I read his letters. I literally read his letters, not copies of it, okay? I haven't been into the archives of our government. But he was the sub-cabinet positions under the first 4 presidents. And he wrote in there what that meant. He says, the Congress has no power to disarm the people, which is the militia, from 16-year-old to 60-year-old people. They should be in the militia, and what the government was doing when he was in as a sub-cabinet position, he had letters back and forth with Jefferson, with Madison, with all of these guys, basically saying, we've got to arm the people with the most powerful of weaponry that we have. It's the birthright of America. The unlimited power of the sword is not in the hands of either the federal or state governments, but where I trust in God, it will ever remain in the hands of the people. In other words, I'm sitting here, and he has a lot of stuff that was written like that. They have the right to have the worst of weapons like the soldiers would have, is what he said. And I thought, wow. And because I was very upset. If I wanted to travel from state to state, I could get arrested in a different state because I don't have the right gun, or I can't have this gun. That's just unconstitutional. And so that was my first one, because it's a big thing. We always say, well, there's enough gun laws on the books. I'm sorry, all of them are wrong. Anyway, so that's the first one I have in here. So I'll go through all of those. So that's, to me, is an interesting one.
I totally agree with you on that, and you do go into that. You lead off with that, and folks, the name of Bill Bazaar's books is 95 Theses, and I'll tell you what, he leads off with our right to bear arms. I mean, it gives we the people the right to carry arms freely from state to state, and is not limited to handguns, or what we know as handguns. It's not limited to any firearm. I mean, it's and where does this idea, for example, come from? and I mean, maybe this is rhetorical, or you hear, well, we're going to limit the capacity of the magazine. Do you see the people lining up, in Massachusetts or Connecticut, one of the New England states here this past year? It was incredible to register these, or to turn them in, or to make them legal. I mean, for crying out loud! And yeah, you do go through painstakingly go through this pretty well.
I have probably more quotes there than anywhere else.
I see that. But how do you argue, for example, with your brother-in-law? Give us some tips, if you will. Obviously, the summer's coming to a close after Labor Day, but nonetheless, we'll be seeing people around Thanksgiving. How do you argue with your, or debate with your progressive, biased brother-in-law who knows everything and says, well, we have these laws, or the Constitution says this, or the well-regulated militia? I mean, walk us through how you, the author of this book, would argue that position.
The main focus that most people would say, well, the state's rights, and I've heard some major talk show hosts in this country say that the state has the right to make a gun law or pass a gun law against certain guns. And Robert Yates, who is on the New York, he was also at the Constitution Convention, and I've got him in here a couple times in the book. And then William Rawle will even say the same thing. Well, the lawyer of that day is that, it says in Article 6 of the Constitution that no state law that is contrary to the Constitution, be it the Bill of Rights, be it any amendment in the future, blah, blah, down the line, no state has the right to have a law that is opposite of that. In other words, they have to make their law to abide by the Constitution. And if they don't, they have to. In other words, they're supposed to. So a state does not have a right to make a law that says you can't freely assemble together. They don't have the right to take your gun rights away. It's the part of the Bill of Rights. So that is what Robert Yates says in here, and I always go to the Article 6, which says they have to, notwithstanding what their law says. It's wrong. It has to be conformed to the Constitution. And so that's number one. That's where a lot of the argument comes from, that the state has a right. Not in that area. If it's in the Constitution, they have to abide by it. And the other one is that we can go into, we always heard this, it's the bad, evil person that does the killing, not the gun. So no matter what gun laws you have, there's still going to be the bad guys that have guns. And you go from there. But I go by, what does that word mean? Amendment number 2 shall not be infringed. So I have the vocabulary in the book where I use that, put that term in there, what it meant in that day, the infringed part. And it means you cannot have anything, nothing, you can't have any little tiny law against the guns. In other words, you can't break it, you can't neglect it, you can't violate it by non-fulfillment. They must not hinder, not even a little tiny bit, the right to have guns. That's all you can argue, I guess, because that's what it really means. And so anyway.
Okay. Well, that gives us a good starting point too, and I'll tell you one thing: I would hand your book off to a liberal, biased, progressive, communist, if you will, relative, and say, here, read this. And I'm going to jump around a little bit too, because I see you in the book. In the book, you've got the Declaration of Independence, 2014 grievances lodged against the United States federal government.
Yes, sir.
And tell us about that a little bit, because I found that to be rather interesting. your listing of grievances. Did you do that, or what's the deal there with respect to the 2014 grievances lodged against the United States federal government?
Well, the original Constitution. Declaration of Independence. Sorry, the original Declaration of Independence. They had all these. I think it was 29 abuses done by the King of Great Britain, and I wrote in here 19. So when I put the Declaration in, by the way, I wrote these, and I must have been on a real rabid feelings that day, and the emotions were really flowing well, because I went back and read this about 6 months later, and I says, "Oh my gosh, that's pretty potent stuff in here I just wrote." And but what it is that the Declaration of Independence was the abuses that the king was doing upon the colonies. And so I'm looking at it, and I'm saying, well, this is very much similar to today. He refuses to assent to the laws, the most wholesome and necessary for public good. Well, what is our biggest law? The Constitution. And they're not abiding by it, so that was my number one grievance right now against my government. So I went through and I had 19 such grievances that I lodged against our government. To be honest with you, I can find a couple more I should have done. But basically, I'm showing how bad our government is today, and that caused our founding fathers to file Declaration of Independence. Now, true, it's not quite 29 yet, but it can be shortly.
Yeah, I'm sure it can. I find it interesting,
because in my book,
too.
2020 Torn Asunder, it's in there.
Well, in your listing of grievances here, I find it interesting where you did write the executive branch under the guise of justice. It has mandated the Justice Department to routinely block the states' rights to govern under the authority of Amendment 10 of the U.S. Constitution. And we talked about that. And we talked also about number 9, or number 8, I think, with respect to the health care bill and so on.
Right.
Very interesting. Very interesting listing of grievances. Unbelievable. And I think another essential. Go ahead.
Well, I have something else here. I mean, I've got some tablets all over my table on all different topics, and I thought, well, when I do speeches, I'm going to have, this is all going to be too long for a speech, so I have pieces I can put together. But what I have in here that I really get upset at and I may have it as one of my points in theses in here, I don't know, but the president of our country and politicians and the media, I have, for instance, well, no, I don't know if I even have it in here. If you go to Proverbs, I have it in my book, I do. If you go to Proverbs 6, there's the 6 things, but there's the 7 things that God hates. And what are they? Well, of course, there's lying, there's deceit, there's haughtiness. But the biggest thing that I see in there over and over and over and over again is dissension. They come out and cause dissension between the races. They cause dissension between the gun owners and non-gun owners. They cause dissension against the rich, against the poor, against the police and the citizens. That is our government causing dissension. God hates these things. And our government's doing them. And we're allowing them to. We don't say anything about it. I just said it. But anyway.
That's right. You know, we have a duty as citizens and as people under God to protect each other, to do what's right, to lay down our own lives for our brother. But today we see a lack of morals even in the church, where it's even the churches are involved in the prosperity gospel, and you don't need Jesus to get to heaven. So when you see such a social or such a moral,
you need money to get to heaven, right?
Yeah, when you see such a moral decline and decay in the churches, how can you reconcile that to help the country regain not only the morals but the political aspect that come from the morals?
So, yes, and you're right, because somewhere here. Okay, we the people have become, we're not following the Bible, even the churches. There's no principles. You don't abide by because it's all a feel good, how are you, we really like you. It's all, this type of a feeling where if you depart from the principle, it becomes a precedent to depart from the next principle, like Jefferson had said with our government, and that's what we the people are doing. We are just becoming immoral, godless, unprincipled, selfish, vain. We're just like our politicians, and we're electing those kind of people. So until we turn from our wicked ways, where the Spirit of God is, there is freedom. And we don't have that right now as a whole in our country.
Right.
We never had everybody that were Christians, but in general, we believe the Bible and we went to God for help. And so anyway, yes, you're right. So our government is there's one other thing I was going to mention about the government. I was reading. We'll get to the Bible thing here. Luke 11, the woes to the Pharisees, and I thought, oh my gosh, who's God talking to? Who's Jesus talking to here? He's talking to the lawyers, the teachers, the professors, our lawyers of today. They're politicians. He was talking to. Yes, it was about the Jewish law. But what was he said? You load down the people with laws and regulations that they can hardly carry, and woe unto you for doing that. It wasn't the law. They were creating laws. They weren't following the principal laws of their, Deuteronomy and, the laws that God gave them. No, they were adding to it. You can't do this, you can't do that, and that's what our government does. It says, then woe to you today's professors and teachers and lawyers, because you have taken away the key to knowledge. In other words, the people didn't even know what the law said. And our people
That's right.
don't know what the Constitution says. In general, most of the people, because I work with them, when I make a statement, they say, yeah, but this is the way it's always been. I says, does that make it right? It says, you've been taught wrong. This is the rule of law. So it's really bad. I just put it that way, because we the people have lacking knowledge. We're going to be destroyed.
Bill, one of the things, and this is conversational. I mean, this is dinner table conversation, folks. And I'm going to involve the audience in this. Joe and I were talking one day, and we said, what we're going to do, and Alex Jones has done this. I think maybe he didn't do it personally, or I think he might have gone through the Heritage Foundation. But we said, we're going to print up the Constitution and have a little Constitution booklets made available to our listeners, and send them out to our listeners, and send them out to. In fact, we took them to the Orlando conference with us and Paul McGuire's table, and people picked them up. But I mean, the majority of people don't have a clue what the Constitution says, what the Declaration of Independence says. How can we fix this? I mean, here we are, just a couple of guys sitting at the kitchen table talking over a cup of coffee or a beer. How in the world are we going to fix this?
Are you asking me?
Hey, yeah, I'm asking you. I mean, you got any ideas?
Well, number one, I wrote the book.
That's true.
The idea is I wanted to somehow, but the problem is that when you're a nobody cares.
Well, okay, but I guess my question is, how are we going to get the people to read the Constitution and care about it?
Well, one thing is through radio. Another thing is through internet. And I've got some ideas about the internet thing that I'm going to be doing shortly. I have limited time, but I'm working at it. And I would love to do ads, provocative ads, but on TV. But they're expensive. It's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. But who's got the money? I don't. You probably don't. So
probably
eventually
right.
It would be nice that someone rich comes along and say, hey, I'm going to help with these ads. I mean, they're provocative ads. They're ads that make people take notice. It takes away, the ads would would tell them that they're going to lose this particular thing that they're getting because of blah, 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 and on it goes. I have probably 20 of those written up. But so I'm going to probably start on the internet with them, but I think that is one key way that can be done. But there is another, what you just mentioned kind of, when I sent my book, I sent out quite a few books. And I went online and I realized that there's lots of Christian organizations, there's lots of conservative organizations, there's the different political parties out there, and everyone is going their own way. If somehow, some way, they can all join forces, be your independent state that you are. Let's pretend that they're a state. But let's join forces at the federal level and go after this and present the Constitution and be able to advertise and be able to do all of this. I think that would be the best way, and the way that where monies would come together to do that. But here again, how do you join all these people together? Because they're all independent. They're all doing good, but we're not going to win the battle when we're all divided. If we are joined together, we have a shot at this. And when you said, so I've been thinking about this a lot, and I thought, wow, there's this organization, that one, and that one. Some of them I've never heard of in my life, and a lot of them I did, but they're all going about it their own way. And I think somehow the churches is another example. If they would all, I brought this up on. I think I sent an email to somebody that sent me an email after they got my book. It was some party in the country. And he said, he mentioned, I said, well, if the pastors would all decide to stand up against the government and the IRS, and they all said we're going to talk politics, I think if pastors start talking politics, it would be helpful. But the problem is we're finding a lot of them that are agreeing to this socialist, communist type government that's coming in.
Yeah, we are. Yeah, we are, because they're afraid of losing their 501c3 status.
But if they would all stand up.
Yeah. If everyone, and that's the thing. I use the example of the airports, for example, with the TSA. One person says, no, you're not going to touch me, you're not going to nuke me. There's an incident, that person gets arrested. If 10 do it,
right.
There's a kerfluffle there that takes place, and if everyone does it, then what are they going to do about it? Really, what are they going to do about it? They're going to stand down like they did before. That's correct. So I think the same thing needs to be applied here. And this goes into a question that I just got via our studio email. And folks can go to hagmanhagmann.com and click on the Contact Us, and then that'll bring up a form, and you can submit questions by email. Catherine from Ottawa figures, first question from Canada, wants to know if you got any blowback from your book, if in fact you have sent this out to any pastors, for example, or even political, giants, so to speak, in America, the Ron Pauls or the well-known political party members. Have you got any blowback?
No, not the problem I have, and yes, I would send it to a lot of those places, my book, because I'd like to. I did send it to some that you can't get an address. You can't. They won't give you an address unless you have someone that knows the addresses. But if I had their addresses, they would get one. Now I have a couple, and the other problem you will have, in my opinion, I knew this, is that a lot of these places, you send them a book, and then it goes through procedures where people, different people look at the books and they open the mail before it ever goes to anybody, and who knows how long it takes before they get it. So no, I haven't had any negative. But I've been talking to people now for quite a few years, and I get negative feedback in the sense, I mentioned Tea Party. Well, aren't they bad? And I said, let me ask you this question. Is the Constitution a bad thing to talk about? They say, well, no. I says, well, have you read the Constitution? Well, no. I says, well, all the Tea Parties are doing. They want us, the government, to be back following the Constitution. Oh. So a lot of people don't know. Even that person wouldn't know. And I've had liberal people at the office where I worked, or still work, and we've talked about this now probably for 6, 7, 8 years because I've been writing the other book. One came to me the other day. He says, Bill, I've been thinking. He's adamant, liberal government. He's changed his mind. He says, I don't think the federal government should have anything to say in the state. I says, amen, brother.
It's about time.
Yes. Anyway, it was kind of neat, actually, when he said that. So.
Well, that's fantastic. And Joe, you can line up the calls on the board, 661-244-9839. We'll be taking your calls for author Bill Bussar, author of 95 Theses. Folks, it's a really good book. I got to tell you, he does a very good job. By the way, did you say you taught history? Did you teach history?
Well, that's part of my history I didn't give you.
Okay.
I went to Northwest University, which is now what it's called, but it was Northwest Bible College. I got a BA in Biblical Literature. So I had a 4-year degree in Bible. Then I went about my life doing my thing in sales, blah, blah, blah. I grew up on a dairy farm. My dad and uncle always talked about when the government takes over the farm, we know how to take care of the equipment, which means wreck it. So I grew up with that fear. I listened to Billy James Hargis. You ever hear of him? My dad listened to him on the radio. It was radio. We had no TV in my day. It was just radio. So Billy James Hargis was all about the communism that is in our government and how the communists want to take over a country. And he was a preacher, and this is what he talked about. So I grew up in that, but I just let it go. And then I was coaching basketball, high school basketball. I said, I'm going to go get a teaching degree. So I went and got a BA a master's in teaching. I got my license. I taught for a whole quarter at a school. I went out to get jobs. I was out getting applications or having interviews for teaching jobs. It's endorsed in history. And that was when I went. This is later in life. I'm not a young person anymore, and I'm in there. And the reason I didn't know I have to be accepted into the darn program, I figured because I wanted to, I could be in it. So the reason they accepted me is that they liked my writing. I did very good on my writing, and I thought, I haven't written. I used to love to write when I was in college, but anyway. But when I was doing my internship, I started writing. And I knew that to be a teacher, it would take up all my time because I'm not going to do lessons that are not planned and rehearsed and taken care of. And, I don't just teach. I want the kids involved, so I have a lot of stuff they would be teaching themselves. So that's why I can talk till I'm blue in the face, but it's not until people read what I'm talking about and then say something to somebody else about what I'm talking about that they really understand what I just told them. And that's how I did my teaching. But I was writing, and I knew that would take up all my time, all my spare time. So I basically never really got in. I did teach at churches and adult classes and stuff like that before that even. So, yes, I did get a degree in teaching, but I never really went out and got hired to be a teacher. But I've been doing writing ever since. And
we did very well. I got to tell you, this your book, 95 Theses, you've gone through it. It's a fantastic, again, a fantastic resource for those of us who want to know, for example, where things have gone awry with the Constitution. And you did this in the format Martin Luther with his
yes,
very very well done, as a matter of fact. So and then the citations in here are outstanding. With citations from the founding fathers, and of course you pair it up with the applicable terms and the vocabulary, which I think is so important, because you get Chris Matthews or O'Donnell talking about, well, militia means this, militia means that. It wasn't meant to mean the people. It wasn't meant to mean, or the Second Amendment. They've got no clue as to what the Constitution says.
Well, yeah, you're right, and most people don't. In fact, I thought I knew what the Constitution said, and I did, but I didn't until I really got into this. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
And the other thing, there's one spot in here which I thought was an interesting thing I put in here, and it's basically St. George Tucker. It's how you apply the constitutionality question concerning a particular power. So you look at the 18 powers of Congress, and then you judge it based upon what he put in here. And I thought, well, that was an excellent way to look at the Constitution. And I thought, so in other words, it's also showing you how to judge, is it a power or not? And anyway, yeah, I enjoyed this. I really liked it. And when you get back to the grievances, I really liked what I went back later and I said, gosh, I wrote this?
You were on a rant.
I was on a rant.
Yeah.
I was.
I've got to say, there's nothing I disagree with, and you there's some pretty strong language used. When I say strong language, I'm talking about very assertive language. Yeah. Very, very. I accuse you of this and that, and
Go
ahead.
It's got to be done. In other words, I like it where there's the duties of us, which we've been talking about a lot of them, but I like one that Patrick Henry said: guard with jealous attention the public liberty. Suspect everyone who approaches that jewel. Unfortunately, nothing will preserve it but downright force. Whenever you give up that force, you are ruined. So that's basically how I did this. It's with force. I like what you said earlier tonight. Force. It should be.
Well, yeah.
Let's force the rules of our law on our people. Yeah.
Well, and we've got the power to do this too, and it's unfortunate that there's not enough to stand together, but or there doesn't seem to be enough to stand together. And if we don't stand together, the old saying, if we don't stick together, we hang separately. And I think that's where we're at. But you've got a chapter in your book here, and folks, I'll say this: one of my the thing that kind of made me sit up and take notice is Bill, your chapter of God created our founding fathers and America today and tomorrow, and it's pretty sobering when you go through that. This book is extremely manageable at 138 pages.
Right.
But it says a whole lot of things in there. But the way you infuse God into the equation here, which is so necessary, and too few do this. You could have a conversation for an hour and a half on Fox News about the Constitution and barely touch upon the influence of God, and that's where our rights come from. God, the Constitution.
Yes, it is. I really
so
enjoyed writing that section. Actually, I did a video on it as well. It's on my website now. I was on YouTube before. It's still on YouTube. Anyway, my inspiration. I get a lot of my inspiration. By the way, I like to listen to programs like yours, or be it Rush Limbaugh, or be it Glenn Beck, or be it somebody. But this God created our founding fathers came from a totally different source. In other words, what happens? I'll be listening along, and all of a sudden, my mind takes off. Something will trigger it, and it takes off, and the program can be shut off. I'm now on this other tangent that I'm on. That's how my mind works. And the other thing that I found out over the years, I never realized this, but when I was a kid growing up, I'd come home from school and we milked cows in the barn, the old flat barns. One side of my dad milked on the other side, and I milked on the opposite side. We're probably 40 feet apart. And I would tell him everything I learned in school that day. The whole time. I didn't even know what I was doing, but I did that. I've always been told I talk all the time. Well, I talk, if I say it, I don't forget it. I found that out. If I say it, if I hear it, and then I repeat it, it's there. It's like it's never gone. And so that's what happens. So when I go on these tangents and I get all these ideas, and then I bounce them off people. So I'm accused by my family that you're always talking. And they said, you'll have no trouble talking for 3 hours. And I said, I know. But this one here, God created our founding fathers. I was watching the Super Bowl a couple of years back. 2 years ago? Well, I watched it last year because the Seahawks were on, but I think but it was what's his name? God created our farmers. What's his name?
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Gosh,
I'm running a blank. But that's your inspiration behind that.
Paul Harvey.
Thank you.
Paul Harvey. He had, it was a whole, and I thought, wow, wait a minute. No, God created our founding fathers. And so off I went.
That's fantastic. It's fantastic how you really fuse that in there, and I think it's an integral part of the book. Without that addendum, and I wouldn't even call it an addendum. I'd say it's really part of the
conclusion.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's
calling the people to be forceful, to stand up and be counted. I like Frederick Douglass's quote over and over again. Now remember, he was in history. He was he freed himself. He was a slave that he freed. He ran away and then he paid for himself and he was free. And he was always trying to free slaves, free the slaveries. And so he says it's not. In other words, he's basically. We have to waken up America. We have to rouse up the conscience of the nation. We have to startle the nation. We have to tell them about the hypocrisy, and they must be exposed, and its crimes against God and man must be proclaimed and denounced. And I thought, yes, and I agree. And that's the way it is with this. But I think it has to start at the local level. Where it can start, again, I'm going to go back to it, is if we some way or other can unify all these conservative, political, religious groups into who did something like this what's his name, the Baptist preacher in Virginia, Jerry Falwell. He did that one time. He got a lot of churches to go into the political forum.
The moral majority.
Yes, the moral majority. If we can somehow develop that again amongst all these people, and it's getting the Constitution recognized and promoted, and get the people turned back to God, and get it all tied in here together, there's a chance. It takes a miracle. It takes God. I don't think man by ourselves can do it. It's going to have to involve God. Anyway.
Absolutely.
So, yes, God created our founding fathers.
And we are coming up against the top of the hour break, but we're going to come back after this break and take your calls. I see we have people on hold now. Stay there. We will get to your calls at 661-244-9839. That is 661-244-9839. Ladies and gentlemen, to our third and final hour of this Hagmann Hagmann Report on September 9th, 2014, a Tuesday. Our guest is Bill Bassar. He is the author of 95 Theses. Let's Save Our Constitution. His website is letssaveourconstitution.com. And we're going to be taking phone calls in this hour at 661-244-9839. Actually, we're going to take phone calls right now. But one quick announcement. Tomorrow night, he has a new book, Nuclear Showdown in Iran, revealing the ancient prophecy of Elam. He'll be joining us tomorrow for the first 2 hours of the show. It's going to be a fantastic show, as always, with Bill. And so do not forget to do that. Join us tomorrow at 8 p.m. But into the calls, once again, 661-244-9839. I want to thank you guys for holding. We're going to go to area code 805 first. 805, you're live with Bill and the Hagmann Hagmann Report. What's on your mind? Area code 805? All right. We'll come back to you. 503. 530. 530. We're coming to you now. You are live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report.
Hey, Doug, Joe, and Bill. Calling you from Paradise, California. And this is Gene. I've talked on the show before, and I'm finding it pretty interesting. I would say as far as age goes, I'm probably more along the lines of maybe your age, Doug. But I remember when I was younger, it was all about God and country when I went in the military. It was to serve God and this country. And the country was it was like a religion in and of itself. I mean, we knew that we had something good in America, and it was worth fighting for, and it was worth preserving. Where we are in time today, it's hard to say exactly what's going to be the outcome of this country and what about the hope. But I'd like to rewind a bit. If we had a big old time machine and could go back to, say, like 1957 when I was in 8th grade, in order to get out of the 8th grade, we had to pass a test on the Constitution. We had to write the preamble. We had to know how many senators there was in each state. We had to go through every aspect of the Constitution, and it was a very scary thing because it was the course of the whole year that we took our time to do that. And so I really do believe the hope, if there is to be any hope in the younger generation, is the school. Going back even before that, I remember when they would open up class, we'd get up, would pledge allegiance to the flag, one nation under God, and then we'd say the Lord's Prayer. And you could always tell the Catholics from the Protestants because the Catholics would always say, deliver us from all evil, and they'd quit, amen, and the Protestants would go, for thine is the kingdom and the power and the glory forever, which I kind of like to say now myself. But I was a Catholic. Doug, you and I probably have a lot of similarities in the sense that
I think so.
Yeah, I was in a seminary too. I was going to be a Catholic priest. My dad was very, very strong. His side of the family. As a matter of fact, his uncle was a Jesuit priest in Boston, and I didn't know. That was another whole testimony with myself about coming out of Catholicism. I mean, my dad pretty much called me a traitor, but I went to confession.
Hey, my dad did too.
Did he really?
Huh.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Well, you know what I did, Doug? I went to confession. I wanted to get right. I had all this guilt going on, and I go in and I just pour my heart out to this priest, When we ended up, he'd say, well, for your penance, say a couple of Our Fathers and 3 Hail Marys, and that was it. But at the same time, I was working a radio program in Salinas, and this guy was witnessing to me about burying the old man and coming up a new creature in Christ Jesus. So I figured, well, gee, I didn't feel, I come out of that confession still harboring the guilt, taking the guilt with me, but I'll never forget when I did get baptized. I went to his uncle's place, and he was a preacher in Hollister, and I'd read through all the 4 Gospels, and I was in Acts, and it was kind of amazing because he filled up the baptism for me, and I came up, and every time I would think about something that would cause me guilt, it was like something was being pruned. I felt like a little weight just fall off me. Then I think about, well, what about this? And then it was a prune. So I knew I did the right thing. I knew that God was with me at that time, and I've had a good conscience towards God ever since. And before that time, I used to have dreams, astral travel stuff, and it was pretty horrific, trying to get back into my body, and I knew if I couldn't, then, I was going to be somewhere in outer darkness. And then I'd let out this ghastly scream, and my wife would give me an elbow, and I'd wake up, and I was okay. But since I got baptized, I've never had that problem again. So, and I thank God for that, But anyway, getting back to the book, Bill, that you wrote, I think it's a great idea. Yeah, I think it's an awesome idea. I really like the way W weighed in. I think he was really right, but it's our education. I mean, what's happened to our schools? What are these kids learning? And it seems like if everybody, again, in order to get out of, if you want to go to high school, you have to know the Constitution. And I mean, that's what I never thought it was any other way. I guess that's how naive I was. I just thought that's the way it was, but I've got grandkids in school today, And I asked them about it, and no, it's not a big issue in schools today. So, I mean, we're looking for solutions, right?
Yes, solutions. You're right. You're back into my time, too. For instance, I was a member of second grade. The teacher, we were singing, saying the pledge and praying, and we were singing Christian songs. This was public school, not even Catholic school. It was public school. Right. And then I remember the day they said, well, you can't pray in public in school anymore. And I thought, huh? What? How's that?
Yeah.
And so you don't think a whole lot about it until now. But the thing is, the schools, okay, I go back to Jesus talking to the Pharisees in chapter 11 of Luke.
Right.
Our leaders, our professors, our teachers, our lawyers, our education system, they are keeping the knowledge from the kids. They don't want them to know what the Constitution says, so they're not being taught. How do I say this? I know you guys have people on there that have, I'll tell you, I don't like to say it, but I was awakened one night from, I would almost call it a nightmare.
Right.
And I was writing this book, and the dream was, I remember I said earlier this evening that my dad we always listened to Billy James Hargis. Okay. And we listened to talk radio that was on the radio in those days, and it was all these. He was a Christian, but he was warning about the communists that were coming into our country. Right. And I grew up in that, and my dad always talked about those things, and even though he was an undereducated man, he knew those things. And I had this dream that my dad was going before me, which my dad has passed away, so he's gone before me. I hate big cities. And I'm going through this big city, high buildings. There was no people. It was the dark of night. We were walking along the streets. My dad was like ahead of me a ways. And all of a sudden, all the buildings were collapsing. There was no bombs. There was no fire. There was nothing going on. It was just no earthquake. They were just crumbling. I remember saying, "Wow, what? Why? Yeah. What's this? There's no noise. They're just crumbling." And they started coming toward me. My dad disappeared. He kept on going. I turned and ran. And all of a sudden, it's like a bolt of lightning. The voice came to me, tell all of them, they're tearing down America on purpose. Wow, yeah. The government is destroying America on purpose, be it through the teachers, be it through the lawyers, be it through whoever. It's their plan to tear down America as we know it. It will be no more. Right. Well, that's the direction we're going in. I mean, it's pretty obvious, and it seems like it's just a matter of time. The good thing is just like going back to like for God and country. God is the first thing, and we were so fortunate. I feel very fortunate that I had the opportunity to live in a country that I was willing to fight and die for if I had to, if need be, for my parents. And the other thing about when I was in school, I didn't talk much when I was. Well, I did. If I had a project and I got up in front of the class, I'd talk forever. I remember that. I did speak up. I did. But I remember being in classes where a couple teachers, there was only a couple of them, that were trying to teach evolution. And I had all these kids that are around me that are not Christians. Right. They're not Christians. And they were arguing against the teacher vehemently that there is a God and you are lying to us. And, I mean, this was the students that were straight A's. Right. And I'm saying, that was the day we were in. Yeah. No more. Yeah. Well, like that 8th grade, I remember evolution was introduced to me for the first time. And, of course, I was an altar boy, too, at that time. And I'd get up and do the San Jose Mercury News early in the morning, about 4 o'clock, roll all the papers. Then I'd go and I'd serve Mass, and then I'd go to school. And my 8th grade teacher, it was about the time Sputnik was up, and we had the space race on. Oh, yeah. And then we tried to send up, we're going to answer with from President Eisenhower saying peace on earth and goodwill to men, and the thing blew up on the platform. That whole time. So that's the time I grew up in. And
But you're absolutely right. I mean, that's the way I recall things. But it was
the thing that I'm going to have to encourage all of us on is, and myself as well, is that you go through the Bible and you'll see over and over again that God stays His hand if we turn to Him. He'll stay His hand if we get involved, get back to Him and our country. In other words, Abraham was praying, I think, over Sodom and Gomorrah, if I'm not mistaken, and he says if there would be just this many people, and then there wasn't. If there was just this many people, he would have stayed His hand.
That's true, and think of how many Christians are in America, and I think of that often, and I even recite that same prayer. And I mean, we're talking thousands and thousands of Christians. Now, there's a lot of different ideas about what God's going to do. There's so many scriptures in there that says, because you've kept my name and kept my faith, I will deliver you from the time of trouble or the time of temptation that will come upon the whole earth. There's another one that even says that that He will you'll pray that you escape the things that are coming on the earth, because when the wrath of God hits this earth, and this earth teeter-totters and rocks are falling on people saying, I don't know if the church is going to be here. A lot of people think we are. They're going to go through the whole thing. But I like there's a scripture even in Isaiah that says, come in and close the door behind you until my indignation be past. And, right after the Olivet Discourse, which is in Matthew 24, 25 picks up with the virgins, the fact that they're all virgins, they're all pure in a sense. However, 50% of them were wise and 50% were foolish. And when the groom came, they were ready to go, and they did go in. But I was going to say something funny about my 8th grade teacher. Going back to what you were talking about earlier, when he mentioned evolution, I remember raising my hand, and he didn't take too kindly to it. But I told him, I said, I'm not going to say his name. God rest his soul, he's gone now. But I says, I call him by his name, and I says, maybe your grandparents were, come from apes, but mine sure didn't. And I mean, all the class, because I spoke up to them, but I was always in trouble doing stuff like that.
Yeah, well, it's like I said, we have to educate somehow, some way, somehow. And I have ideas, but it takes money, so hopefully somebody will have money to do this. But anyhow,
thank you, caller. That caller was right on the money, and folks, I would urge people to homeschool as well. And I know Joe and I have talked about that, and because you've got to.
In fact, we homeschooled before it was legal.
Never knew it was illegal.
Yeah, well, it was illegal, but we had to keep it kind of quiet for a while.
Yeah. Well, and we're going to see, by the way, or I do believe that we will see in a very short amount of time, and I think you feel this way too based on your book, 2020 Torn Asunder, is, the church is going to be driven underground. And we've had Coach Dave Dobmeyer on talking about this. What does he say? When speech becomes hate speech, it's because when truth becomes hate speech, it's because people hate the truth, and that's that's an amazing statement.
You're right. And then that was something we didn't talk a whole lot about here, because that's really one of my issues here. For instance, like God can't be in the public square. We can't have Christmas trees or anything like that out, even though Christmas trees not necessarily religious.
Good point.
Has anything to do with Christianity. But anyway, the public square, that is the beginning of taking those rights away when we can't. So I like it when this kid decided to pray anyway or talk about God anyway. What are they going to do? So if all the churches did speak about political things and from their pulpit, then what is the government going to do? Arrest all of them?
They can.
They can't. So that's why, as a group, people have got to do things. And then I like James Madison quote. I may be in the book, but there's not a shadow of right in the general government, which is talking about our government, to intermeddle in religion. Its least interference with it would be a most flagrant usurpation. And I'm saying, just saying God's not allowed in the school. That's one of those. It's the least. Then you can't have it in the public square. And then you can't have the 10 Commandments. And now the preachers can't talk about politics. And then it's going to be, you have to, if you have a business, you have the gay marriage people that they're going to sue you, and the government fines you because, even though it's your religious rights to say, no, I don't do this. So it's getting worse.
Right.
And it's all wrong.
It's not about equality. It's about special rights with respect to religion or same-sex marriage and homosexuality and such.
Marriage really has nothing to do with the federal level. The federal level has nothing to do with the domestic level, be it the economy, be it anything in the states. Nowhere. The federal government, of course, my book will show that. I go through it, but in general, they have no right to interfere in this area. Period. And I even talk about judges, the powers that judges has, what they're supposed to judge. They're not abiding by the Constitution. They're judging on everything. And I think W brought up the fact of it was in 1958 that the federal government. Is that when? I think that was when the man he talked about being a Supreme Court Justice, Warren Court. They're the law, and that was in 58. So anyway, so they're not following the Constitution. Anyway.
All right, let's go to another phone call. We're going to go to area code 510. 510, thanks for holding. You're live on the Hagmann Hagmann Report with Bill Bassar.
Hello.
Good evening.
Howdy.
Hello, Mr. Hagmann and Joe. How are you?
Very well. What's on your mind? What's your question for Mr. Bassar?
I just called to give my testimony. My name is Vontae Grzeski, and I just wanted to talk about what Jesus has done for me. Basically, keep it short and simple. When I was 8 years old, I had a tumor in my right leg. When I took the CAT scan, the tumor was about the size of a 50-cent piece. It was very painful. They were going to do surgery, so a couple weeks went by with my family praying to Jesus, not to Muhammad or Buddha or anybody else, but to Jesus. And within about 4 weeks, it came time to do the surgery on my leg. I got CAT scanned again, and somehow, some way, it just disappeared. Well, obviously, it was a miracle, praying to Jesus. But so I just wanted to give my testimony.
Well,
and
thank
also,
you for that.
I want to read a couple scriptures. Psalms 118, 8 and 9.
Go ahead.
It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in people. It is better to take refuge in the Lord than to trust in princes. And I'd also like to give another scripture, Hebrews 13:8. Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, as today, and forever. And that's all I got to say. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Bill, comments on that? I mean, look, you're a Christian guy. We're talking about the Constitution, but we're also talking about the Christian's role with the Constitution. Anything to say on that?
The thought that came to me when he was doing that, we must confess Jesus. We must talk about the miracles. We must do that, and that will bring more people into the, coming back to God. And so, it's fine that he did that. I think it was great.
Okay, I got an email here from a woman by the name of Summer. Okay, and she's actually listening live outside of London, UK, where it's very early in the morning there. Wow. Wants to know about. I just closed the window. Isn't that fabulous? Live radio, don't you just love this? Joe, go ahead and take the call. I'll grab that. Or take another call. I'll grab that email back.
All right.
It was a good email too.
Area code 203. 203. We're coming to you now. You're live on the Hagmann Hagmann Report with Bill. What's on your mind tonight?
Good evening, gentlemen. First of all, Doug and Joe, thank you so much for your wonderful program. It has been enlightening, and I learned quite a bit. To the gentleman you have on there, Mr. Bassar, the things that you have written about are so true, and it's wonderful to hear. But I'm so pessimistic about what I've seen around me, about the young people, about people in the society in general. They seem lethargic. They seem like they're just wrapped up in their own little worlds. They have no idea what's going on around them. They have no idea of the freedoms they're losing day by day. It's just disheartening. My family won't even speak to me. They tell me that I'm conspiratorial and overly suspicious, and I don't know what I'm talking about. These things won't happen here, and I feel like Chicken Little running around screaming the sky is falling, and no one is listening. But it just seems like everybody is wrapped up, and no matter how much I talk to them, and I do, and I'm a thorn in the side of my congressman, it's just no response, and I just don't see the society has just been lulled into a sleep. I do now see what Jesus was talking about they have eyes but they don't see and ears that they don't hear.
Yeah, I agree. And okay, I remember when I was young, a lot of the stuff I wouldn't pay much attention to, even though I did. I just was kind of flippant. You went about your life, and so how you deal with that is another story. But how I deal with people, it doesn't matter if it's family, it doesn't matter if it's people at work. You have to come to them with knowledge, and which I mean by knowledge is, what does it say in the Constitution about the Congress's power? And so those 18 powers. If you go and say, well, this is so. I don't, and if there's like the people who were upset about big business, I'll say, well, if they followed the Constitution as the Founding Fathers intended, it wouldn't be the way it is today. In other words, so you must learn what that is. I used to get in arguments with people because we were not discussing the Constitution. We were discussing politics. We were discussing religion. We were discussing they hated Bush and stuff like this. But when I realized if I turned it around to the issues, this is the issue I see. In other words, it could be the immigrants, or it could be whatever you want to make it, the gun laws, or it's the states' rights. You start talking about the item, the issue, from a knowledgeable standpoint of the Constitution. And then here's one thing I will tell you that you will find from people is that, well, it's old and outdated. And I have used this on people, and this works. It makes them think. I said, okay, if it's old and outdated, that's fine, but let me ask you a question. How long has man been on the face of the earth? And they'll say, well, I said, tell me, how many years? 5,000, 10,000, 20,000? Tell me. And, they don't want to answer. I said, a long time, though, right? Yes. And I says, how long has the Constitution been around? And you tell them, like, 238 years. And I says, out of those thousands and thousands of years, all the governments were kings, pharaohs, all the bad people, Hitler's, Mao Tse-tung, or whatever his name is in China. On and on it goes. And tribal chiefs, Indian chiefs, what do they do? The Mayan chiefs, what do they do? I says, that has been around forever. Constitution's only been 38 years, and you say it's old? It's the first time we have the greatest nation on the face of the earth, and you want to know why it's the greatest nation on the face of the earth? It's because of the Constitution.
Right.
And
I agree totally with you.
But it's hard. There's a lot of people out there that are that way. But I to be honest with you, people now will converse with me where they didn't want to in the past, and they're coming around to my way of thinking. But it takes time, and we don't have a whole lot of time. So that's why we need to do some mass radio, mass talking on talk shows, mass everything if we can. And people that have all these organizations that can get together and form a unity, like Moral Majority or something. Anyway, it's tough. It is tough.
Beautiful.
And we may not win, but I'd like to think we have a shot at it.
We can.
Anyway,
We can
God
never
bless
give
all
up.
of you.
Thank you so much, caller. God bless you. And I did find Summer's email here, and she wanted me to make sure that everyone knows that hails from Atlanta, Georgia, has been living just outside of London now for the last 3 years. Wants to know if you believe, Bill, whether because we've heard this before, and it's she gets into some detail here. We're not going to have elections in the next year, next presidential elections, and so on. We've heard this now for probably the better part of the last decade.
Tell her to buy my book, 2020 Torn Asunder.
Okay, I will do that. However, she wants to know, bottom line, do you foresee a situation where, and I think I know the answer to this, but do you foresee a situation where federal elections could be suspended?
Yes. Yes.
Wow.
That's because we're not following the Constitution. Yes.
All right.
It's already been declared null and void by all our Congress people.
Well, let me hop
by
on
their
the
actions.
back of okay, and let me hop on the back of Summer's question and ask you: Do you feel that the American people and Congress and everybody will take it lying down, will roll over and play dead and say, okay, well, given the circumstance, no.
No.
All right. Okay.
Well,
and nor do I.
I don't. I'll be honest. I remember some talk show talking one day about our government and all its rules and regulations, and he says there is absolutely no way. But I can see how it could happen. There's absolutely no way that the government can have control of every area of every part of our country. I mean, look at the mass area of Montana and all the big, the
right.
Dakotas and all the Nevadas and all that kind of stuff. Although I think they're working on an army to do that.
Who are Obama's brown shirts in your estimation, based on your research of the Constitution? When I say brown shirts, remember that speech he gave where he said we need to build up a domestic army,
yep.
Independent. Okay, who is he referring to in your view, based on your research? Who is he referring to?
There again, I've got green shirts in my book.
Well, I mean, could it be DHS?
Who they are? I honestly think that there are in the military. They're developing. They're questioning people, and they're screening them, and they know the ones that will be the troops that will do the president's bidding. And I think that's the negative of all this talk that we're doing, and I think it's very important that at that point, I think Congress might rebel against it. I don't know. I have a feeling that he's going to have the control. What are they going to do? Is what the president's thinking. But the brown shirts, I don't know. They could be in the colleges. Students.
Interesting thought, because
I think to me it's more. It'd be some military, I believe, but I think it's going to be more of these people that are for climate change. It's all climate change. We have to do this, and we have to change the way we live, and all that kind of stuff. And there's a lot of students that would gladly be his troops on the ground, going out and arresting people and stuff like that.
All right. We have some more callers here. Let's get to these guys. Thank you for holding. We're going to go to 814 area code. 814, you're live on the Hagmann Hagmann Report with Bill Bassar. What's on your mind tonight?
Yes. Hi, how are you guys tonight?
Great. How are you?
Really good. Listen, I had a question. I did contact my local, my state, my all the governments, from Pennsylvania. I did contact them. I did contact them several times. And their excuse for the Constitution, because what I found is the Constitution of Pennsylvania was totally different than the Constitution of the federal government, and it says that we have rule over sovereignty and gun control and everything such as that. So I did contact everyone, and what I found really frustrating is I got catch-22 plus or times 22. I got, well, we have to go along with the federal government because. Now, at first, our representative, and I'm not going to mention his name, but at first our representative down in Washington, he was like, well, you need to calm down. And I said, well, wait a minute. I'm very calm. And I was talking to him constitutional-wise. And I was just explaining, okay, well, wait a minute. If all this goes down, our Constitution says it's not allowed to. Our Pennsylvania state Constitution says it's not allowed to. And he's like, well, we have to work with the federal government. And, and then I contacted local and our senator. Well, we have to work with the people in Washington. We have to work with our representative in Washington. And that's what I find very frustrating. Along with, I agree with the caller that says, people don't want to listen. I do agree with that because people are not wanting to hear. But I understand that as a Christian. I understand that. I can get it because I didn't want to hear it one time. And so I can get it. Everybody takes their own time to hear. And so I can get that. But when it comes to constitutional rights, what I feel really frustrated about is even if you go to, like you had suggested, Bill, even if you go to your state, your local, your senator, you go up to these meetings in your local town hall, people are they're just no. We have to work with them because oil or gas or whatever. And really, in the state constitutions, the different ones, and I started after ours, I started looking up different state constitutions, and different state constitutions say the same thing. And I'm like, how can they get away with this legally? Now, I know you're probably going to say they can't get away with it legally.
It's all about the
money,
caller. It's all about the money, caller.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Sure.
Because that I do find that frustrating because I do try to advocate our Constitution. So it's all about the money. So in other words, they're willing to sell us down the river, basically.
Yeah, and we'll hear what caller thinks for the call. Bill, what do you say about that? I mean, do you agree with me that subjugating
it's all money.
If
somehow or other we can break them from their money, which is almost like it's drugs to them, how do you break that habit? And when I say at the local level, yes, you can call and complain to those that, well, for instance, here where I live, it's a kind of a rural county, and I come home one day and there's little flags all over the property, and I'm saying, who in the Sam Hill's been walking all over the property? Well, the neighbor was selling his property, and he's got little flags all over his property. So someone came in and decided they have the right by Agenda 21. Our county is letting them run the show. But I'm saying, holy cow, this is just a rural county. And some of it's just kind of naive. They are naive, not knowing the powers of what's happening. But when I say talk at the local level, I mean your neighborhood. You've got to be in your neighborhood. You've got to be in your church. You've got to be in, maybe your family is not the place to talk, but in your neighborhood and your Little League games, you're sitting there talking to people. You'd be surprised how many people will start talking to you, and they may agree with you. Someone sees my book, and they're saying, oh, wow, and then we're talking. And I never knew they even thought like I did. Some of them are more radical than I am. But so what I'm saying is you talk at the local level with the people, and pretty soon with the local tea parties. I think the Tea Party people have to get more in tune to what the Constitution says, not talk about big government versus small government, not talking about we got to take the debt down, we can't spend so much money. We got to talk Constitution. It ain't going to happen.
I agree.
and I get, that's what really bugs me, is that that's all we're doing. We're complaining about it. And bigger government versus smaller, and we talk about the border problems, and we talk about foreign problems. Well, let's talk Constitution problems, and with the people. So you have your little groups. Maybe you have your little neighborhood group. You maybe have your women that get together, a church group. You discuss it. You can bring in God into all this about the Constitution. And that's what I'm talking about. And then you get together with your local political group. Sometimes you have that, and you start with Tea Party people or whatever. And there you start picking on people who will be your statesmen and stateswomen that will run for the local office in your state capital from your local little district. And what really irritates me, and may I say this? I'm of this age.
Please.
And I decided I want to run. I'm a delegate from my little 1 square mile here in the county to the county convention. So I was told that if you want to be a state delegate, you just, in writing, give a letter to the local office, the party office. I go there. This is an election year. I go there, and this is a national presidential election year, and I go there at 10:30 in the morning on a weekday, and the office is closed. This is like in May. No, it was more like in, I think it was March. I thought, what? Where are the retirees? Where are the retired guys that are 65, 66, 62, 70, whatever, that are healthy? They're doing fine. They were business people. They worked for big companies. They maybe even have been lawyers. I don't care who they are. Where are they? How come they're not involved? Don't they have grandchildren that these things are happening to in our country, that the Constitution is going to take their freedoms? They have to pay for all their debts? No, they're out on the golf course, or they're going on RV vacations. They need to be involved.
Wow.
And they're not.
That surprises me. And now, was it just that day? Was it extended? I mean, did somebody wander in at 1 p.m? Do you know, or was it?
I don't know. I complained royally to them, but I don't know what the situation was exactly.
Man.
But I mean, you have enough retirees that can spend 1 hour of their time or 2 hours of their time. You would think an election year. But what I'm also saying is that these people who are very knowledgeable people, they're businessmen, they're retired businessmen, why can't they spend 2 years as a legislature in the state government? They don't have to go to the federal government. Why aren't they running? No, we're through with life. We're going to play around and die? I'm sorry. I mean, I'm preaching to. That's what I don't want to be that person. How's that?
Well, no, and you're not. I'll tell you what. By writing this book, and I can't say enough good about the book itself, ladies and gentlemen. 95 Theses. I really can't. It's a great encyclopedic type of reference guide for the average person, for the lay person, for a guy like me, for a guy like Joe, for the listeners. It's really an average guy's or an average person's reference manual, and there's a lot of gold in here between the covers. I do like the last sentence, by the way.
Oh, you do?
The last sentence on the back cover, which states, "How strangely will the tools of a tyrant pervert the plain meaning of words." And isn't that true? That's by Samuel Adams. Man,
also true.
Wow. Okay. Joe.
We got a few more calls.
He's also. I'm going to have to mention this in quick passing. He was also the one that, remember, we heard about redistribution of wealth?
Yep.
Well, so I'm going through all the Founding Father quotes, and I come to this quote, and it says, "The utopian schemes of leveling and redistribution of wealth are arbitrary, despotic, and in our government, unconstitutional." I thought, my Founding Fathers already were talking about this? Samuel Adams.
Well,
thought,
right.
Wow, those are smart guys.
And that, of course, goes toward the We talk about a lot on our show about the luminous connections that we saw at the beginning of the founding of our country. Now, and of course, that's another 16-hour show or 20-hour show. But go ahead, Joe.
All right, area code 865. We're coming to you now. You're live on the Hagmann Hagmann Report with Bill Bessar.
Hey guys, hi. This is Pat from Tennessee. I haven't called in for a while.
Hi.
Where you been?
Hi. I've been busy with my Hagmann's Heroes work.
Thank you. All right.
Bunch of moms, we kind of quietly go around and discuss things and give information, and kind of under the radar.
Well, send me an email, and I'll send you some Hagmann bumper stickers and.
Great.
Okay, so send me.
You got to get above the radar.
That's right. Well,
it's very effective, though.
Yeah, and I'll tell you something. It's the secret handshake among the listeners. It's the little logo of our show, the secret handshake of our listeners. But I didn't mean to take up your time. Go ahead.
Well, that's all right. I just called with a hopeful note, I hope. Real quick, I went to a yard sale. I live near the Smoky Mountains, kind of in the backwoods of Tennessee. And there was a group of people there. This one man was selling guns, and we were all talking, and we just had a good conversation. One lady was against the guns, and we were both. This guy and I were just talking about, how important they are, how we need them, how we have the right to bear arms, and all that. Real good conversation. People joined in. It's been talked about in the churches here lately. The other thing is, my daughter goes to a Christian school here. Last week, she's in 11th grade, and the history teacher took them to Washington, D.C. She took them on a 4-day tour to all the historical sites, and her whole aim was teaching those children about the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the Bill of Rights, and they had a deeper understanding because last year they had to take a history class which solely taught about the Constitution.
Cool.
So, yeah,
and so... Mm-hmm. We need a whole lot more of that.
Mm-hmm. And then there's a woman who just started a store here. She has a room for small groups. So we're going to start some small groups in there, talk about the Constitution.
That's where it begins. That's great. Great.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, Doug, the other thing, I don't want to take too much time, but I wanted to tell you, remember I called a while ago and I said there were helicopter flights back and forth to the Smoky Mountains?
I recall that very specifically, and I talked to Steve Quayle about that, and I talked to Greg Evenson about that. Yes.
Okay. Well, they've really ramped up. They used to be just one flight in the evening. I'd watch them. The past, I'd say, month or so, they've been going back and forth 4 times a day. And I was thinking today about it. I thought maybe if there are troops up in those, the designated areas in the Smoky Mountains, the UN designated areas, I thought the only reason, maybe there's more troops there and they have to take more supplies. That was just kind of a thought I had today. But my daughter said it. She goes, Mom, the flights are going back and forth all day. They go right over our house into the mountains and back.
Very interesting. I'll advise both Steve and Greg again and let them know that they've ramped up. It's interesting timing, to say the least, and I just want to thank you again for your call. And don't forget to send me an email. We'll get you some stuff out. Bill, I got to tell you, man, there's military activity taking place here within the continental United States, as that caller indicated.
I know. I wouldn't doubt it. Because when 2020 Tomorrow Thunder comes around, basically it's if we don't stop the government, it's going to be chaos pretty soon. In my book, there's all the stuff you're talking about. It's in there because I foresaw it all coming, but I still thought there's hope to stop it. In my main character, to the very end, she totally says, I want to be involved, but what can I do? It's too late, the guy said. She said, well, I'm going to still want to. So it's like anything else, I grew up thinking that I'd be lucky to get married because God's going to come, the earth's going to come to an end. But it hasn't. So we have to still keep the fight no matter what we think is going to happen tomorrow. It could collapse on us tomorrow. But we have to keep the fight, you know.
Absolutely. Let's go. We got another call we're going to take. We're going to go to area code 910. 910, thanks for calling. You're live on the Hagmann and Hagmann Report with Mr. Bassar.
Hello, Mr. Bassar. Bill, I've got a question for you. Earlier you mentioned about the person early in the country's history that wrote a note about that people should have the best weapons the Army has.
Right.
Is that in your book?
Yes.
It is in
that
the book.
one's in my book. It's on
like
Powers of the Sword are in the hands of... Yeah, it's in there. Yep.
Yeah.
And here's what... The militia of these free commonwealths entitled and accustomed to their arms, which is talking about the 16 to 60-year-olds, when compared with any possible army, must be tremendous and irresistible. That's the type of weaponry they intended the people to have. Yes, that's in the book.
Equal power.
I've always suspected that, but not having anything to go on other than just my gut feeling that that's what they intended.
Yes,
it's
that's
good
what
to
they
have.
intended. And then there was the one about George Washington here, and he's got a real good quote too. And I'm not sure if that was in the book or not. It probably is. A free people ought not only to be armed and disciplined. Discipline goes with it. But they should have sufficient arms and ammunition to maintain a status of independence from any who might attempt to abuse them, which would include their own government.
And that's on page 2 of your book, by the way.
Oh, it is. You're right.
Yep.
So those are what they intended. That's the constitutional intent of the right to bear arms.
Fantastic.
Now, talking about constitutional knowledge, several months ago, while listening to Doug and Joe or someone else, I got the hint of a book or a little handbook, a primer that was used back in the 1800s on the Constitution. It's like I think 60 different questions that they used to teach the children, and they would have to answer those questions about the Constitution.
You're right. Yeah, I forget the name. It was a primer of some sort. Yes. Excellent. That's what we need to be doing nowadays.
Yes, exactly. We need to get stuff like that back in our schools.
Well, parents are losing control of the schools. We have all this Common Core coming into all of our schools, districts, even in the state of Texas and everywhere. And I'm saying to myself, where are the parents? Aren't they concerned about these things? And they need to get in. I remember we had to do quite some battles I'm trying to remember the years, the 70s or 80s. There was things that they were trying to put into the schools. It got defeated. It got pushed out. It didn't happen. So the parents have to get involved against these things and say, let's teach this stuff. Go after the school board. Become a school board member.
That is my project coming up, is to get myself elected to the local school board so I can work to accomplish some of the things like that.
Yeah, well, that's all of us have got to get involved. I'm just, it's too bad. I've been involved in politics. I was delegate at a county convention in '88 and got a little discouraged then, and now I got discouraged, but now I'm deciding to do something different about it. I'm going after him with the word. Yeah, do it. Everyone's got a calling. Everyone's got some area of expertise or God-given gift that they can work in. So, go for it.
Thank you, caller, for that call.
Yep.
And
your go ahead, caller.
Doug and Joe, I really appreciate all the work you've done to bring me to know of Steve Quayle, Tom Horn, and everyone in that, David Langford, et cetera, et cetera. I really appreciate that. And Mr. Bizarre, even though I've just learned about your book, I will now be able to order something to increase my library.
Yeah, you can get it from Amazon or from my website. Yep.
Yeah, I saw it on your website. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, caller. All right. Yeah, we're getting down to the last final waning moments of the program. We were notified that I think we might get cut off about 2 minutes short of our normal time because of some maintenance issues. But in the final moments here, Bill, what are your closing comments, thoughts? We're going to let you have the last word in terms of your thoughts and what we need to do, where we need to go, and so on.
Well, I will sum it up this way. We, the people, it's our duty. It's ours to enforce the Constitution. It's ours to learn about the Constitution. So here's what we need to do. We need to get out there and not be ignorant anymore. We have to demand that we get the national people to follow the Constitution. We have to teach it. We have to study it. We have to read. We have to learn. If a nation expects to be ignorant and free, it expects what never will be. So we have to be learned. We then have to start talking about it. And we have to be forceful. We have to tell everybody this is the way it is and talk Constitution. Don't talk politics, talk Constitution. And then, like Frederick Douglass says, we have to stir up a storm. And I want to be, actually, I've got a quote here that if I can find it real quick. I want to be like Abraham Lincoln was and this was in 1839, Abraham Lincoln. This is not in the book. I'm sorry, but I found it later. Many free countries have lost their liberty, and ours may lose hers. I know that the great volcano at Washington, aroused and directed by the evil spirit that reigns there, is belching forth the lava of political corruption in a current broad and deep, which is sweeping with frightful velocity over the whole length and breadth of the land, bidding fair to leave unscathed no green spot or living thing. While on its bosom are riding like demons on the waves of hell the imps of that evil spirit, and fiendishly taunting all those who dare resist its destroying course with the hopelessness of their effort. And knowing this, I cannot deny that all may be swept away. Broken by it, I, too, may be. Bow to it, I never will.
Wow.
Lincoln in 1839, a very powerful quote.
Fantastic.
That's
all right,
on my
sir.
website. I put that on my website somewhere. So.
and your website again is. Go ahead and give out your website again, sir.
Let's Save Our Constitution, just all one word.
Let's Save Our Constitution.com. All right.
Yeah, and that is under tyranny. If you look under tyranny on there, that quote is under tyranny.
All right. And folks, you can go to Hagmann.com, click on the left-hand side. It'll take you directly to Bill Bizarre's website, also to his book. And, hey, no problem at all. And 95 Theses is very, very, very worth it to grab a copy for yourself. And, hey, one for your pastor, perhaps, or one for your
everybody.
Somebody, you know. Yeah, exactly.
It's not that expensive of a book, guys.
Not at all. Not at all.
No.
And it's full of good knowledge, and you want to be well armed in a debate, conversation, or whatever about the Constitution, about current times. There it is. Bill, thanks for
you guys
being on the show. All right, buddy.
Yeah,
you take care, and we'll be talking again soon.
All right, great. Thanks,
Bill.
All right. God bless. Folks, that was Bill Bizarre, and fantastic author, fantastic book, 95 Theses. I just want to hurry up and get in here before we get cut off by any maintenance issues that we got going. Joe?
Tomorrow night we'll be joined by Bill Salas, the author of many books, Israelistine, Psalm 83 War, and his latest, Nuclear Showdown in Iran, Revealing the Ancient Prophecy of Elam. He will be with us at 8 o'clock till 10 o'clock. Do not miss that show. If you want to know what is in the future, according to Bill, from Bible prophecy and pertaining to Iran, Israel, and the events happening in the Middle East, you're not going to want to miss it. Until then, stay safe, God bless, and have a great night, everyone.